A foodie girl, out buying a midnight snack, unexpectedly gets into a car accident and transmigrates to another world, becoming a maid. In this different world, armed with the delicacies of her modern one, what sort of curious fate awaits her? A young man was cautiously pouring a potion into the pot. Just as success seemed imminent, a sudden noise startled him, causing the potion bottle in his hand to slip and fall into the cauldron. Instantly, a loud boom erupted within the room. Simultaneously, in another dimension, the girl stared around in bewildered horror, unsure how she had arrived here. She pondered for a moment, seeming to recall something. It turned out that while going out to buy food, she had been too focused and failed to notice the large truck approaching from behind. Consequently, she was hit. It seemed she had already perished. So, could this place be the legendary afterlife? The next second, she grabbed her hair, filled with regret. If she had known, she shouldn't have stayed up late binge-watching dramas, nor should she have groggily gone out shopping when hunger struck at 5 a.m. Thinking of the pudding in her fridge brought even sharper pangs of grief. If only she had eaten it sooner. After venting her emotions, she sighed. Was she destined to remain here forever? Just then, a bright light flashed. When she opened her eyes again, her surroundings were completely transformed. Floating mountains, glowing flowers and plants, giant mushrooms. Could she have arrived in heaven? However, seeing her reflection in the mirror left her stunned. Her hair had grown longer, and her chest had become fuller. What exactly was this place? Why was she lying in this bed? She looked around. Could this be the legendary transmigration? She decided to go out and investigate first. Yet, when she noticed her attire, she was initially shocked, then captivated by her current figure and the style of the clothes. Just then, a knock came from the door. Upon seeing the unfamiliar young man, her heart instantly raced. Following him to the living room and listening to his explanation, she finally understood her current identity, a commission maid. After careful consideration, she concluded that what she needed most right now was stable lodging and money. Thus, she decided to accept the commission. Once they reached an agreement, the young man introduced himself. He was Murichi's landalonin, but she could call him Nan. The girl shook his hand, replying that her name was Xiaoming, and asked for his consideration in the future. Her duties involved cleaning and preparing meals. He gave her a spatial bag. The money for purchasing necessary items was stored in this crystal. She picked up the crystal, examining it closely. Suddenly, she noticed Nan's gaze fixed intently on a certain part of her body. Her eyes widened instantly. She slapped him. Nan hastily explained that there was a large tear on the back of her skirt. He was merely trying to confirm it. She turned her head and indeed found a large rip in her skirt. She couldn't help but lament what on earth had happened to her. There were scorch marks on her clothes, and her head throbbed intermittently. Nan broke into a cold sweat. It was because his magic shield, carrying sparks, had collided with her. But considering her temper, he decided it was best not to tell her the truth. He briefly recounted the incident, telling her he had saved her, then urged her to quickly take a bath and change into clean clothes. Outside the door, Nan instructed her to familiarize herself with the environment first. Work would officially begin tomorrow. The room she was just in would be her bedroom from now on. Soaking in the bathtub, Xiaoming pondered. Everything before her eyes was in a style she had never seen before. She touched the water. This realistic sensation couldn't possibly be a dream. Could it be that something as absurd as transmigration had truly happened to her? Suddenly, her stomach rumbled. She was incredibly hungry. When she saw the food on the table, she hesitated. After much thought, she decided to try the soup first. The soup contained only salt and tomatoes. Next, she picked up a slice of what looked like boiled meat, only to find it was actually half-baked bread. It crunched loudly when bitten. It was simply too hard. She almost couldn't resist flipping the table. For a gourmet like her, this was utterly unbearable. Later, through Nan's explanations, Xiaoming gradually came to understand the situation in this world. Here, people didn't care much for culinary skills. Being full was enough. Most ingredients looked and tasted similar to those in her original world. Moreover, she could somehow understand the language and writing here. What puzzled her was that although some ingredients were edible, the descriptions in books on how to use them left her completely baffled. It seemed she would have to experiment herself. The next day, Xiaoming took it upon herself to cook delicious food. First, she made a tasty egg roll, then blanched asparagus in boiling water. Finally, she diced the apple, lemon, and pear, added honey, and crafted a refreshing cold fruit drink. Nan gazed at the breakfast she brought over, unable to help but admire the sentiment behind this meal. As Xiaoming watched him spear a piece of egg roll with his fork, her heart fluttered with apprehension, wondering if his sense of taste had evolved at all. However, Nan's feedback brought her relief. He hadn't expected that eggs could be prepared so deliciously, and the asparagus, he had always regarded it merely as an ornamental plant, never imagining it could actually be eaten. While savoring the delightful food, Xiaoming inquired how to use the items Nan had given her the previous day. Nan looked at her, a hint of surprise on his face. Had she truly never used such things before? He explained the method. Simply open the bag, and information about the items inside would appear in her mind. She could reach in to retrieve or store items. The bag could hold anything at all, except for living creatures. The one Nan had given her had a capacity limit of 300 different types of items. Xiaoming took out the crystal Nan had provided and tried chanting gold coin. Following his instructions, she gripped the crystal, and sure enough, a gold coin materialized. Her eyes lit up as she stared at the coin, instinctively bringing it up to bite it. Watching her utter fascination with the gold coin, Nan couldn't help but wonder just how poor she really was. On Item Street, in the eastern part of the Halaya Kingdom, Xiaoming stood amidst the bustling market center, marveling at the prosperity around her. Shops lined both sides of the street, displaying a dazzling array of goods. Yet, much to her surprise, she couldn't find any soap here. Washing with only plain water clearly wasn't enough for a thorough cleanse. Shaking off her thoughts, she quickly immersed herself in the joy of shopping. Wandering through the extraordinarily lively market, Xiaoming was delighted to discover a full range of utensils, along with a wide variety of ingredients and spices. The magical bag Nan had gifted her seemed enchanted. No matter how many items she placed inside, it remained as light as air. It was truly the perfect shopping companion. Her purchasing complete, Xiaoming returned home, elated. She took out a large piece of wild boar meat, deciding to make it the star of today's lunch. The wild boar here was a type of large mushroom known as red hair. First, she sliced the meat thinly, then mixed it thoroughly with various seasonings, letting it marinate for 30 minutes. While waiting, she busied herself preparing the side dishes. The marinated meat slices were coated in breadcrumbs and placed into a hot oil pan, fried until golden brown on both sides. After being removed and cooled, they were fried once more. Paired with her homemade tomato sauce, the taste was bound to be divine, and was deeply drawn in by the aroma of the food. As his fork gently touched the crispy outer layer, it made a distinct crunching sound. He couldn't help but doubt if this thing was truly edible. However, as he cautiously placed a piece of the meat into his mouth, the sensation, crispy on the outside, tender on the inside, fragrant and juicy, made his eyes widen. He found it incredible that this was wild boar meat. The taste, that combination of the crunchy crust and the succulent meat, compelled him to take bite after bite. When Nan dipped it into the tomato sauce and tasted it, the unprecedented freshness of the flavor utterly intoxicated him. Yet, he had no idea that the red dipping sauce was made from tomatoes. Xiaoming smiled and told him it was her homemade tomato sauce, especially good with fried foods, and called out her name. Meeting his puzzled gaze, he broke into a brilliant smile. Watching him reach out and firmly grasp her hand, Xiaoming felt a surge of nervousness, unsure of what he intended to do. Nan leaned closer, their faces nearly touching. Xiaoming was flustered. When she heard him say he wanted to keep her by his side for a lifetime, she was utterly shocked. He seemed to be speaking of something incredibly startling. The next second, Nan's words jolted her back to reality. His intention was to keep her by his side forever, and with double the pay. So, he was referring to the matter of her contract. Nan handed her a brand new contract. If she had no objections, she could sign and affix her fingerprint. When she glimpsed the compensation, her eyes practically turned into symbols of money. 100 gold coins a month. She was truly going to strike it rich this time. However, she immediately grew cautious. Could there be some hidden catch? She scanned it hastily. The content seemed fine. The job description remained the same. Only the employment term had changed from 1 year to permanent. This job offer was almost excessively generous. Even if some accident occurred midway, 1 month's salary would be enough to support her for quite some time. Having thought it through, she signed her name and pressed her fingerprint onto the seal. The very instant she finished sealing it, the contract was abruptly snatched away. Nan carefully put the contract away and announced that from this moment forward, she was his exclusive maid. Xiaoming couldn't shake the feeling that she had somehow fallen into a trap. Just as she was lost in thought, a voice suddenly interrupted her musings. Outside the door, a captivating elf beauty gracefully approached. She walked to Nan's side, intimately draping an arm over his shoulder, not forgetting to tease him a bit. Nan waved her arm off his shoulder, clarifying that Xiao Meng was the maid he had officially hired from the guild. He then pointed out the messy state of the house, declaring it was all her masterpiece, leaving a mess behind before simply taking off. Faced with Nan's accusation, the elf beauty put on a pitiful expression, claiming she usually took good care of him. Just then, the elf seemed to think of something. She walked over to Xiao Meng, extending her hand for an introduction. Her name was Yingyu, Nan's work partner. Xiao Meng politely introduced herself as well, though inwardly she speculated. Judging by their intimacy, perhaps they were dating. Nan, having settled down, asked Yingyu the purpose of her visit. Yingyu informed him that a rift had appeared in the eastern part of the dense forest, and rare magical creatures had already infiltrated it. His Majesty wished for it to be subdued as soon as possible, preferably departing immediately. According to reliable sources, it was a mutated griffin, immune to divine attribute skills. It could spew purple flames and was exceptionally agile. While they conversed, Xiao Meng had already prepared some afternoon tea and snacks. Considering the dietary habits of elves, she had specifically prepared entirely vegetarian food. Nan told her Yingyu wasn't a picky eater and ate anything. He then picked up a pastry, murmuring to himself, "Indeed, Xiao Meng is the best." Xiao Meng didn't quite catch that and turned to look at him. He gently ruffled her hair, praising her cooking skills as unmatched. Having said this, he pulled Xiao Meng into his embrace. She was the first person who made him eager to finish work quickly and return home. Hearing these ambiguous words, Xiao Meng's face flushed crimson. She couldn't help but wonder if this fellow was being intentional or not. Nan's gaze also turned towards her, puzzled. He suddenly leaned closer, asking with concern why her face was so red. Was she catching a cold? Xiao Meng softly replied that she was fine. Those delicacies that had never received praise from others, he was the first to affirm them. Yingyu held her water cup, glancing over perplexed. Why had this guy suddenly become such a homebody? As she tasted the water in her cup, she was surprised to find it both cool and refreshing, her mouth filled with the rich aroma of lemon and strawberry. Her gaze shifted to the platter, the delicacies within sparking even greater anticipation. She picked up a pastry and took a bite. The crust was slightly crisp and browned, while the sweet clarity of the apple filling inside was intoxicating. Truly delicious beyond measure. Upon learning that Xiao Meng had made all of this herself, she couldn't resist wanting to poach her. Nan, however, told her to dismiss the thought. As long as he didn't terminate the contract, Xiao Meng couldn't possibly work for anyone else. Yingyu remained unconvinced, stating that an employee could leave simply by paying the breach penalty. However, Nan had already taken precautions. In the newly signed contract, he had modified the termination clause so that only the employer had the right to end the employment relationship. Xiao Meng took the contract but couldn't find the clause Nan mentioned. Nan pointed to the spot. She still couldn't discern it. Unexpectedly, Nan then took out a magnifying glass, explaining the print was too small and required magnification to be seen clearly. Xiao Meng instantly flared up in anger. Why did only the employer have the right to terminate the employment? This clause was as tiny and hard to spot as an ant. She considered it fraud and resolutely refused to accept it. Nan, afraid she might tear up the contract, quickly retrieved it and hid it away. Then, he gently put an arm around Xiao Meng, whispering to her that Yingyu had some peculiar habits. Yingyu's ears twitched slightly, clearly having overheard Nan's comment. She stepped forward, grabbed him by the collar, and started accusing Nan of spreading rumors. Before departing, Nan came to the garden and instructed Xiao Meng that he would be away for about 20 days, during which time she could arrange her schedule freely. Xiao Meng inwardly rejoiced upon hearing this. Finally, she could slack off and enjoy herself to the fullest. Seeing her vivid expression, Nan couldn't help but lean closer, wanting to know what she was thinking. Xiao Meng, startled, turned bright red. She quickly stepped back several paces, hastily denying having any thoughts at all. Nan looked at her, puzzled by such a strong reaction. Xiaoming thought Nan had further instructions and waited for him to speak. In the end, Nan just patted her shoulder, silently promising to notify her before his return. Then, a greedy smile appeared on his face as he requested a lavish feast for his homecoming celebration. Not to be outdone, Ingyu raised her hand, demanding to be included, stating she would also attend. Xiaoming nodded in agreement, promising to prepare enough food for everyone then. After hearing this, Ingyu enthusiastically stepped forward, wanting to give Xiaoming a kiss, then stopped their playful antics, urging them to hurry and set off. Xiaoming watched them walk further and further away. She turned around, took out soybeans, planning to start making soy sauce. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. Not only had she successfully made soap, she had even successfully developed an all-purpose cleaning solution. Although the process was a bit tedious, it truly solved many washing problems and saved considerable time. She busily wrapped the soaps, her thoughts drifting to Nan and Ingyu's safety. 2 months had passed, and they still hadn't returned, sparking a growing worry within her. During this time, she had also meticulously prepared all the daily necessities. Just then, Nin finally sent word, informing her he would be home by noon today and was eagerly anticipating the celebration feast. Hearing his less than serious tone, Xiaoming felt a flicker of annoyance, but the preparations for the celebration feast could not be neglected. She took out a prime cut of black beef tenderloin, thinking to herself that a grand feast naturally called for hot pot. Thus, she washed various fresh meats, sliced them, and arranged them meticulously by cut on platters. Vegetables were similarly prepared and set on the table. Finally, she began to personally stir-fry the hot pot base. Just as the broth and all the ingredients were ready, the sound of Nan arriving home came from outside the door. The two returned, practically faint with hunger. Ingyu caught the fragrant aroma filling the air, her mouth watering involuntarily. Their timing was perfect. The hot pot was just beginning to bubble. Ingyu gazed at the abundant spread on the table, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. She eagerly asked what kind of delicacy this meal was. Xiaoming proudly introduced it as hot pot, a delicious dish from her homeland. Next, she began instructing the two on how to enjoy the hot pot. First, place the desired ingredients into the pot to cook, then dip them in a specially prepared sauce before eating. Nan followed her instructions, cooked a piece of meat, dipped it in the sauce, and popped it into his mouth. He immediately exclaimed how incredibly delicious it was. Ingyu, not wanting to be left behind, hastily tried it herself, astonished by the unexpected flavor. Having not eaten a proper meal in 3 months, that single bite seemed to bring her back to life. As the meal progressed, Nan and Ingyu even started playfully fighting over a piece of meat. Xiaoming couldn't help but chuckle softly. She brought out more ingredients, assuring them there was plenty. Placing drinks on the table, she then inquired about their mission. Nan slowly recounted their tale. The campaign this time had been arduous, resolved only after considerable trouble. Unexpectedly, they were then ambushed by a group of Highlanders. Hearing this, Ingyu angrily slammed her cup down. If they hadn't just endured a fierce battle, she would have definitely taught those fellows a lesson. Xiaoming heard they were injured and quickly asked if their wounds were serious, if they needed medical attention. Nan gently cupped her face, telling her he had already treated them with magic. However, the treatment would leave some after effects, causing extreme fatigue. Having said this, he gently kneaded Xiaoming's cheek, remarking on how soft her skin was. Xiaoming blushed crimson, pushing his hand away while muttering inwardly that she couldn't let you misunderstand. Xiaoming knew what they needed most right now was rest. An idea flashed in her mind, a perfect way to alleviate fatigue. Thus, she invited Ingyu to enjoy a floral bath together, claiming it was highly effective for soothing tiredness. The two arrived by the bath. Xiaoming handed Ingyu a bar of soap, suggesting she thoroughly cleanse her body with it before soaking. Xiaoming patiently showed her the proper way to use the soap. After washing, Ingyu slowly eased herself into the bath water, letting out an involuntary sigh of contentment. This is so comfortable. She became deeply interested in this bathing method Xiaoming had introduced, as well as the soap itself. Xiaoming explained that where she came from, work pressure was immense, both tedious and stifling. Therefore, she had devised this method to treat herself well. Learning that Ingyu liked her soap, Xiaoming generously offered to give some to her. Hearing this, the other woman embraced her enthusiastically. A dazed, almost infatuated smile spread across Xiaoming's face as she thought inwardly, "Wow, so big and soft." But then she remembered something and reminded Ingyu to keep an eye on her boyfriend, telling him not to be overly gentle with other girls. Ingyu was puzzled by her words, tentatively asking if she meant Nan. She then clarified to Xiaoming that they were merely friends. Seeing Xiaoming's incredulous expression, Ingyu couldn't help but burst out laughing. She explained they had grown up together since childhood, their relationship akin to that of siblings. Ingyu teased that Nan might harbor ulterior motives towards her or perhaps have feelings for her. Xiaoming's cheeks flushed upon hearing this. She muttered under her breath that ulterior motives seemed more likely. Ingyu overheard her words and shot her a meaningful glance. Who knows? The next morning, when Xiaoming found the others still asleep, she tiptoed off to wash the clothes. Just then, a handsome and dashing elf man appeared at the door, asking if Nan was home. Xiaoming opened the door, politely inquired about his business, and invited him into the living room. At the same time, she served exquisite pastries and tea, asking him to wait a moment. The elf man accepted the teacup, yet seemed quite unfamiliar with this type of beverage. This handsome elf was named Chris, a highly skilled artisan. Just as the three were engaged in intense conversation, Nan walked over and sat down opposite Chris. It turned out he had come under the orders of His Majesty, bringing generous rewards. However, Nan's attention seemed entirely focused on the pastries in his hand. He interrupted Chris's polite formalities, asking him to get straight to the point. The rewards bestowed by His Majesty included, for each person, a portion of variant griffin meat and tailbone, as well as 2,000 gold coins. Xiaoming was initially drawn to the meat Chris had brought, but upon hearing Nan's words, she immediately snapped back to reality. She quietly sought confirmation from Nan. It turned out Chris was actually a prince. She instantly felt somewhat impolite, having only prepared ordinary tea and pastries. Nan was clearly a bit hungry. He instructed Xiaoming to take his share of the meat and prepare something to eat. Ingyu also asked her to take her portion as well, reminding her to make plenty. Based on the description of variant griffin meat in the illustrated guide, Xiaoming thought its texture might be similar to marbled beef. Thus, she took out a sharp knife, already having the best preparation method in mind. Xiaoming first soaked the tailbone in clean water for about 30 minutes to remove the blood. Once the water boiled, she added appropriate seasonings, brought it to a rolling boil over high heat, then turned it down to a low simmer for 5 minutes, before reducing the heat further to continue stewing. When the meat became tender, she added white radish and a suitable amount of salt, brought it to a boil over high heat again, then turned it back to a low simmer until the radish was soft and tender. Next, she pan-fried the meat cutlets, flipping them every 15 seconds. After repeating this 3 times, she removed them and diced them into small cubes. She returned the meat cubes to the pan for a quick stir-fry, finally drizzling dark soy sauce for color. Once all the dishes were ready, she began the final plating. Ingyu, already drawn by the enticing aroma, couldn't wait to taste it. Chris looked at the delicacies Xiaoming placed on the table, curious about this novel preparation method, and even more tempted by the fragrant aroma assaulting his senses. Beside him, Ingyu had already started feasting heartily, occasionally letting out satisfied sighs of admiration. Chris hesitated for a moment, then finally speared a small piece of meat and tasted it. The instant he took the first bite, he was conquered by the wonderful texture, feeling that all the food he had eaten before paled in comparison. Even the side dishes of potatoes and vegetables exuded a rich, meaty fragrance. The fruit added to the red wine transformed the originally inexpensive wine into something luxurious, and its chilled temperature was simply intoxicating. After eating, they felt their bodies surge with energy. Although eating griffin meat wasn't supposed to have any special effects, the only commonality among the three of them was that they had all tasted Xiaoming's cooking, then used magic to inspect the food Xiaoming had made. The results were astonishing. Each dish actually possessed different magical properties. Ingyu looked at Xiaoming in disbelief. Her food was actually imbued with magical power. Xiaoming quickly explained that her cooking just used everyday methods, and the seasonings were only common ingredients like ginger and pepper. The others stared at her in shock. Those materials, commonly used in alchemy, were actually used by her as seasonings. No wonder Nan always felt these materials were running low. They were primarily used for repairing cracks in the magic wall and were extremely precious. Xia Ming innocently fiddled with her fingers. In her hometown, these things were mainly used for flavoring. After hearing this, the three unanimously agreed that Xia Ming needed to learn some magical knowledge. Chris volunteered to teach her magic, but Nan interrupted. He argued that as an accomplished mage himself, he could teach her. There was no need to seek help from afar when it was readily available. Then he looked seriously at Xia Ming, stating solemnly that he, the Archmage, would personally instruct her. Nan began to impart magical knowledge to Xia Ming. He first took out a magic stone used for testing magic. It could enhance and release magic. Everyone has their own corresponding magical attributes. Ordinary people usually possess life magics like fire, water, wind, and earth. Special ones include ice, lightning, and holy magic. Plant and dark magic, however, are race-specific magics. After explaining these basics, Nin demonstrated how to summon water using the magic stone. Xia Ming watched the scene before her, utterly amazed. Nin handed the magic stone to her, gesturing for her to try. Xia Ming excitedly took the magic stone, her heart filled with anticipation, hoping she possessed the talent befitting a protagonist. She closed her eyes, concentrated her mind, and the magic stone began to glow. He watched her, filled with anticipation, wondering what miracle would occur next. After the test concluded, Xia Ming lightly brushed her hair back, momentarily lost in self-admiration. In the next second, Nan's words struck her like a colossal mountain, pressing down until she could barely breathe. The test results showed she possessed only two affinities, fire and water. She was merely an ordinary person. Unwilling to accept this reality, she rallied at the thought that her attack capabilities were yet to be tested. This gave her renewed spirit. As the protagonist of her own story, surely she must possess formidable offensive power. In the near future, she was destined to become a great mage, save the world, capture the heart of a handsome, wealthy man, and reach the pinnacle of life. Brimming with confidence, she attempted a fireball spell. Yet, the next moment, nothing remained in her palm but a wisp of faint smoke. Hope seemed to shatter completely. Nan comforted her, explaining that magic wasn't simply about chanting incantations. Hearing this, hope flickered anew within Xia Ming. She believed there was still a chance for her to learn attack magic. For days past, Xia Ming finally began to grasp the chasm between reality and the novel she loved. The so-called protagonist halo didn't exist. To make matters worse, Ingyu remarked that her accent was too strong, wounding her pride deeply. Subsequently, Ingyu handed her a magic scroll, suggesting she give it a try. Xia Ming accepted the scroll and, after confirming Ingyu wouldn't demand it back, carefully unfurled it. The scroll emitted a glow before vanishing into the air. When she casually glanced towards the fruit bowl, she was astonished to see an identification panel automatically appear beside the fruit. Her hand could even pass right through it. She was ecstatic, realizing she had finally learned her very first spell. Seeing Nan's solemn expression, Xia Ming instantly assumed he was about to demand tuition fees. However, Nan had no such intention. He simply instructed her to prepare some supplies for a journey, as he planned to take her to the Fines Mabel dungeon. Xia Ming couldn't fathom why they needed to go there, but Ingyu seemed to have already guessed Nan's purpose. Chris expressed his desire to join them. Nan initially hesitated, citing Chris's status as heir to the throne, but Chris informed him that he had already renounced his right of succession. Furthermore, as the elf with the strongest defensive capabilities in the entire kingdom, he was confident he could protect everyone. Xia Ming interrupted their discussion, terrified at the mere thought of the mysterious dungeon. Feeling she would only be a burden, she decided it was best to stay behind and look after the house. Nan reassured her, telling her not to worry. He could use restorative magic, and both Ingyu and Chris would be accompanying them. Ingyu, seemingly sensing something, gently pushed Chris away, agreeing they would rendezvous the next day. After the two had departed, Nan looked at Xia Ming, assuring her again to relax, because he would always be by her side to protect her. Xia Ming slapped his hand away, feigning indifference. Seeing this, Nan abruptly seized her hand. He gravely informed her of the mission's importance, reminding her sternly of the clauses within their contract and the consequences should she breach it. Thinking of the contract's terms, Xiao Ming couldn't help but curse inwardly. That damned indenture contract. Later, when Xiao Ming saw Malky, she was utterly captivated by its adorable appearance. She couldn't resist wrapping her arms around its neck, burying her face in its wonderfully fluffy feathers. Nan watched her nuzzling the creature and urged her to hurry and mount, reminding her that they were short on time. Once they were both seated, Xiao Ming sat pouting in front of Nan, mentally puzzling over what he had meant by jump. Just then, Malky spread its powerful wings, crouched low, and under Xiao Ming's astonished gaze. With a whoosh, it leaped forward. Xiao Ming's terrified scream echoed through the air. As fear gripped her, Nan pulled her close, shielding her tightly in his arms. "Hold on tight," Nan instructed. "We're about to accelerate." Xiao Ming clutched him nervously, asking how much longer it would take to reach their destination. She was already starting to feel dizzy, on the verge of vomiting. Soon, they arrived at their destination. Xiao Ming quickly found a secluded corner and couldn't stop herself from being sick. She rubbed her aching backside, groaning inwardly about the rough ride. Afterward, the group proceeded on foot, venturing deeper into the forest where the path grew rugged and difficult to traverse. As the sun began to set, they found a suitable spot to make camp and rest. Xiao Ming took out the ingredients she had prepared beforehand, placing them on a grill to cook, and reheated the soup from earlier. Everyone gathered around to enjoy their evening meal together. Later that night, Xiao Ming slept sprawled out without a care. Nan gently draped a blanket over her. The next day, they arrived smoothly at the dungeon entrance. Nan reminded Xiao Ming that ahead lay the dungeon's interior, where various monsters lurked alongside unknown dangers. Hearing this, Xiao Ming fearfully hid behind him, worried they might suffer a total party kill. Nan comforted him, assuring him they were quite confident about handling the middle sections. However, this statement only made Xiao Ming more uneasy. Did that mean they weren't confident about the latter half? He firmly refused. Without absolute certainty, he would rather not go. Nan told him that with his magical culinary skills, they would definitely be fine at least until the end. He also promised to protect him no matter what. If he really didn't want to go, that was also an option. However, packs of wolves prowled here at night. This deterred Xiao Ming from acting alone. Ultimately, he compromised, deciding to follow them. Stepping into the dungeon, a strange sound suddenly echoed in Xiao Ming's ears. Terrified, he clung tightly to Nan. "That's the cry of a giant-toothed flame pig," Nan said, quickly shielding Xiao Ming behind him. Just then, a panicked young woman dashed past them, closely followed by a ferocious giant-toothed flame pig. Nan surmised the girl must be a novice. Fleeing with one's back to a monster was the most dangerous thing to do. No sooner had he spoken than the girl was nearly struck by the monster's magic. Xiao Ming, hiding behind Nan, anxiously urged him to save the girl quickly. "This kind of monster can be dealt with in a single move," Nan remarked. As he finished speaking, Ingyu and Chris attacked together, felling the giant-toothed flame pig with one effortless strike. Xiao Ming turned into a little fan, utterly impressed by their strength. Ingyu, after striking a cool pose, suggested Xiao Ming prepare some pork dishes. But he wasn't skilled at slaughtering and butchering beasts. Ingyu produced a sharp dagger. "Leave this to me. I guarantee I'll butcher it beautifully." Watching Ingyu like this, Xiao Ming couldn't help but feel a shiver of danger. Nan seized the opportunity to tease him, reminding him of his earlier warning about Ingyu being strange sometimes. Hearing this, Ingyu sent Nan flying with a punch. Chris urged Nan to get up quickly and help, as someone over there was injured and needed healing. Xiao Ming expended great effort processing the pork, nearly collapsing from exhaustion. After catching his breath, he fried the meat patties until golden brown on both sides. He then cut the meat into large chunks and skewered them with vegetables. Once the delicacies were ready, he held up a skewer, calling everyone over to enjoy the meal. The aroma drifted over to Nan, even interfering with his spellcasting. But he resisted the temptation, deciding to finish healing the injured first before savoring the food. Soon, Nan had healed the injured. The rescued girl was overcome with gratitude, thanking them profusely for their help. Seeing her sorrowful state, Xiao Ming felt sympathy and generously shared his food. After tasting it, the girl too was deeply impressed by Xiao Ming's culinary skills. Once the rescued man awoke, the two decided to leave. Before they departed, Nin inquired about some information, wanting to know why this mid-level monster had suddenly appeared in the upper levels. The girl replied that this was also the first time they had encountered such a situation. Xiaoming noticed Nan's expression turn grave and couldn't help but worry. Was something significant about to happen? Xiaoming felt uneasy. What exactly was going on? Nan explained that a high-level monster must have invaded the dungeon. When monsters feel threatened by higher-ranking ones, they might be forced to migrate, thus disrupting the ecological balance here. Thinking about monsters potentially roaming everywhere, Xiaoming grew anxious about encountering powerful enemies. Nan sensed his fear and quickly reassured him. Even if they needed to retreat, they should first figure out what the newly appeared monster was. Xiaoming saw the determined glint in Nan's eyes and knew that, regardless, they had to investigate. He silently prayed in his heart, hoping they wouldn't encounter danger. The sun gradually began to set. Xiaoming took out the meat stewed at noon, deciding to make it the main course for dinner. But he realized their recent meals had been heavy on meat, possibly lacking vitamins. So, he changed the evening meal to a nutritionally balanced stewed bone combo rice. Then looked at the dinner, which had more vegetables than usual and seemed slightly dissatisfied. Xiaoming explained that eating only meat leads to nutritional imbalance and began listing the various benefits of vegetables. They hadn't expected the meat of the giant-toothed flame pig to be so incredibly delicious. Xiaoming also recommended the marrow within the large bones to everyone, calling it another rare delicacy. After Ingyu tried sucking the marrow, she immediately fell in love with the taste, completely disregarding the elegance of her eating posture. If only there were straws here, Xiaoming mused. However, she was unaware. The aroma of the delicious food she had prepared drifted far and wide. A young boy, drawn by the scent, halted his steps. Following the fragrance, he located their campsite, just as Xiaoming was sharing the delicacies. Suddenly, she saw Nin toss aside his chopsticks, urgently gesturing for her to come closer. Utterly bewildered, Nin warned her to watch her back. As she turned around in confusion, she froze in astonishment. A youth, radiating an overwhelming aura of dominance, hovered in midair. He appeared to be an incredibly powerful magical creature. The stranger watched them warily, clearly believing they had trespassed upon his territory. In her panic, Xiaoming flung the plate she was holding. Unexpectedly, the magical creature behind her caught it deftly. After tasting a bite, the creature showered it with praise. It turned out this creature was a dragonkin. Seeing Nan's tense expression, it was evident this dragonkin possessed formidable strength. Having finished the food, the dragonkin, still unsatisfied, commanded Xiaoming to prepare more. As if having made a decision, Xiaoming quietly moved closer to Nan. She invited the dragonkin to enjoy the food from the large pot, planning to seize the opportunity to escape. She pointed towards the nearby large pot, telling the dragonkin there was plenty of food there. The dragonkin turned to look, indeed finding an abundance of delicacies inside, and began to feast heartily. Nan swiftly scooped up Xiaoming, who couldn't use teleportation magic, instructing her to hold on tight. Simultaneously, he urged Ingyu and Chris to quickly activate the teleportation spell. Xiaoming and Nan were teleported together to an unfamiliar location, temporarily separated from Ingyu and Chris. They now found themselves somewhere near the dungeon entrance. Due to the dragonkin's unique nature, gauging his true strength was difficult. They needed to reunite with Ingyu and the others as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the dragonkin was relishing the meal, unknowingly eating until he was completely stuffed. These dishes managed to fill him up. They certainly had some skill. Suddenly, he realized everyone around him had vanished. Legend held that dragonkin were an alien race, possessing astonishing combat power upon reaching adulthood. Nations everywhere sought to eliminate them. Several days later, Xiaoming was comfortably enjoying a meal at home. Because of the dragonkin's appearance in the dungeon south of the city, an emergency meeting was being held in the imperial capital. Consequently, Xiaoming received a rare short break, feeling exceptionally cheerful. Suddenly, a voice whispered beside her ear, requesting to share some food. Xia Ming turned her head and saw an adorable talking doll. The doll pitifully claimed to be hungry, asking for just a little bit. Faced with those large, watery eyes, Xia Ming's heart softened, and she couldn't help but agree to its request. However, looking at the now empty plate before her, Xia Ming couldn't help but marvel. This appetite was practically on par with Nan's. The cute doll ate to its heart's content. To express its gratitude, it proposed forming a familiar contract. Xia Ming misheard it as a pet demon. The doll continued to coax her, saying that once the contract was formed, it could stay by her side forever. Unable to resist its pleading, Xia Ming agreed to form the contract. The doll explained the contract's details. Xia Ming obediently followed the instructions, but after waiting a long time, nothing happened. Just as the ritual was about to begin, Xia Ming sensed something was wrong. The voice speaking to her had suddenly changed. She opened her eyes and was shocked to find the dragonkin from the dungeon standing before her. The dragonkin seized her hand. Xia Ming tried to pull away, but stumbled and fell to the ground. The dragonkin fell with her, pulling open her ribbon, warning her it might hurt a little and telling her to endure it. Xia Ming was completely stunned. What on earth was happening? The dragonkin landed on the ground, wiping blood from the corner of his mouth, praising her as worthy of being his attendant. At the same time, Nan rushed to help Xia Ming up. Midway through the meeting, he had sensed an abnormal fluctuation in the barrier around their home and had immediately rushed back. He anxiously asked if Xia Ming was hurt, but she remained silent. Nan gently wiped away her tears, comforting her not to be afraid, that he would protect her. He held Xia Ming tightly in his arms, determined to avenge her and deal with the scoundrel before them. Watching this scene, the dragonkin felt extremely displeased. He warned Nan not to touch his attendant. Nan settled Xia Ming in a safe place, then rushed forward, landing a punch squarely on the dragonkin's face. His opponent, showing no weakness, returned the blow with equal force. The two were poised for a magical showdown. Xia Ming, furious, shouted at them to stop. He admitted it was all his fault, that he hadn't paid enough attention before agreeing to the contract with the dragonkin. Hearing this, the two paused their fight, turning towards Xia Ming. It turned out the dragonkin's contract was rather unique, requiring a mark to be left on the other party, a detail not mentioned beforehand. Regardless, the ritual was complete. The dragonkin declared Xia Ming was now his attendant. This was an indisputable fact, a statement clearly directed at Nan. Enraged, Nan pulled Xia Ming back, claiming he had already forged a lifelong contract with him. Thus Xia Ming should belong to him. The two launched into a fierce argument over Xia Ming's ownership. Listening to their exchange, Xia Ming found the situation increasingly absurd and tried to interrupt them. But they paid him no heed, continuing their relentless quarrel. Xia Ming repeatedly called for them to stop, but his words fell on deaf ears. He clenched his fists in anger. What did they take him for? Xia Ming darted forward and, without ceremony, delivered a punch to each of them. A short while later, the three sat in the living room. Nan was provoking the dragonkin. Xia Ming slammed his cup onto the table, sharply telling him to shut up. He turned to the dragonkin, demanding to know what this so-called attendant contract was truly about and why he had suddenly gained immense strength earlier. The dragonkin explained that Xia Ming should address him as Lord Xian, and the attendant in the contract meant follower, not pet. The realization dawned on Xia Ming. No wonder his tone had been so misleading before. He had intentionally let him misunderstand. Xian carefully examined the changes in Xia Ming, finding them quite interesting. Upon the contract's formation, Xia Ming had gained a portion of Xian's power and magic. Hearing this news filled Xia Ming with immense joy. He thought to himself that if anyone dared bully him in the future, he could send them flying with a single punch. Nan scoffed that Xian was quite generous. However, Xian didn't get angry. Both knew Xia Ming's value. Nan asked if he wasn't worried Xia Ming would team up with him against Xian. Xian let out a cold laugh. His life and Xia Ming's were now linked to a certain extent. If something were to happen to him, Xian didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Xian guessed Nan's identity, a member of the Felquerido family, then clenched his fists, asking fearlessly, "So what if I am?" Xian was well informed about their family's affairs and knew Nan's purpose for going to the dungeon. But with Nan's current strength, heading there was tantamount to suicide. Thus, he proposed a deal where both parties could get what they needed, then questioned why he should trust him. Xian confidently stated that dragonkin always keep their word, unlike certain other races who frequently go back on theirs. Nan eventually agreed, but with one condition. As soon as Xian found what he was looking for, the contract with Xiameng must be immediately dissolved. Xian consented to this term. In the bathroom, Xiameng stared at the mark that had appeared on his neck. Recalling Xian's words, his mind filled with confusion and disbelief. How would things turn out like this? No matter how hard he scrubbed, the mark wouldn't wash off, driving him mad. Lying in bed, Xiameng tossed and turned, unable to sleep. He replayed everything that had happened since the car accident. He wanted to go home. The next morning, Xiameng was still asleep. He rolled over, his hand inadvertently touching something. He groggily opened his eyes. The moment he saw Xian lying in his bed, he jolted awake. How did this guy get into his room? Ingyu and Chris came by for a visit. Xiameng let them in. Just then, Xian emerged looking for food. Ingyu greeted him, but then recognition dawned, and she instinctively launched a magical attack, demanding why the dragonkin was here and telling Xiameng to hide behind them. Xian explained he was Xiameng's new master, and they could simply call him Xian. Ingyu and Chris were incredulous. Ingyu sought confirmation from Xiameng. He sighed, saying it was a long story. After hearing his account, Ingyu couldn't help but exclaim, "Amazing!" His cooking had actually attracted such a powerful figure. Xiameng buried his face in his hands, stating he didn't need this kind of glory. Xiameng introduced the two parties to each other. Ingyu was thrilled beyond words. To become partners with a rare dragonkin, this was definitely something worth boasting about. Just then, Chris remembered the purpose of his visit and handed Xiameng the whisk he needed. This was the first time Chris had crafted something with such a structure, and he was quite curious about its use. Xiameng explained it was for stirring, capable of creating even more interesting and delicious desserts. Ingyu's interest was piqued, and she eagerly offered to help. Xiameng thought for a moment and suggested they could make cream puffs for afternoon tea. Ingyu had never heard of such a dessert, so Xiameng described it as something utterly irresistible. He began preparing the necessary ingredients. During the process, Ingyu curiously asked Xian why he had chosen Xiameng. Xiameng himself wasn't sure how to explain it, except that it was similar to Nan's situation, and the two had nearly come to blows over it. Hearing this, Ingyu's penchant for gossip flared up, and she pressed Xiameng about his feelings. Xiameng feigned ignorance, but Ingyu told him to stop pretending. Two men were fighting over him. Surely he must feel something? Xiameng confessed frankly that he was almost dying of frustration. When Ingyu asked who he would choose as his master, Xiameng recalled his earlier attempt to test Xian. He had taken out a gold coin and asked Xian, "How about this?" The other had looked utterly baffled. The dragonkin indicated it wasn't impressive. Xiameng remembered that in novels and movies, dragons always loved gold and such. So, he dangled the gold temptingly, offering all the gold coins he possessed if Xian would just dissolve the contract. However, Xian remained unmoved. Xiameng tried again, emphasizing pure gold coins. Mind you, definitely not chocolate. Xian put his hands on his hips, retorting, "Who told you dragonkin like gold coins? The continent hardly lacks gold mines." Just as Xiameng was racking his brain for a way to get him to agree to break the contract, Xian suddenly pinned him against the wall, declaring, "You have no idea how lucky you are. Many people crave power and would do anything to become a Dragonkin's attendant. You should be pleased." Xiameng helplessly expressed his wish to give the position away, but Xian told him that within the perilous dungeon, having an extra master meant an extra layer of protection. Xiameng had to admit Xian had a point. The unknown dungeon was truly terrifying. Xian gently stroked his head, telling him not to overthink it, just act as he always had. Being his attendant wasn't a loss. Thinking back on this, Xiameng could only tell Ingyu with resignation, "I suppose both of them are my masters now." Ingyu sensed drama brewing. Xiameng then asked about her and Chris. She explained they were merely friends, but Xiameng clearly didn't believe it was just a friendship. As they talked, the puff pastry shells finished baking. Soon, the creations were complete. Ingyu thought the cream puffs were utterly adorable. She couldn't resist trying one and sang its praises. "This tastes truly wonderful." She finished the entire thing in one go. Xiameng seized the chance to tease her. Some things you only know by trying them boldly. Ingyu shot back, telling him to sort out his own three-way relationship first. Xia Meng weakly protested. It's just a master-servant relationship. What's there to sort out? Ingyu leaned closer, asking teasingly, is it really that simple? Chris raised his teacup. I came here to relay the conclusion of the meeting. For safety considerations, His Majesty has decided to temporarily seal the dungeon. This is mainly due to the agreement signed with the Dragonkin, as well as the attendant relationship between Xia Meng and Zian. This matter needs to be registered with the guild. Xia Meng, arranging desserts nearby, muttered gloomily, it's not like I wanted this either. Zian picked up a dessert, stating, since the matter is settled, it cannot be changed. Chris inquired if Xia Meng and Zian had any intention of serving the country. Xia Meng stated he had no say. The decision rested with them. He caught the look Nin sent him and understood his meaning. Chris then stated, I will endeavor to persuade my father emperor to ensure you face no obstacles on account of the Dragonkin connection. Following this, Chris sampled the dessert in his hand and was instantly captivated. This pastry is truly exquisite. This dessert is called an éclair, perfect as an afternoon tea treat. Its shape is also lovely and cute. After Nan finished eating one, he discovered it increased attack speed for 30 minutes. He asked Xia Meng to make some more. Then, they continued discussing the dungeon. Nan decided to head there again, this time accompanied only by Xia Meng and Ingyu. Xia Meng couldn't understand why he was being brought along. He had no combat ability. Nearby, Zian, hearing her own name omitted, let out an indignant snort. She declared that since Xia Meng was going, she would naturally accompany him, her tone firm and allowing no refusal. However, Ingyu and Chris were both officers in the Kingdom's Legion. They needed time to return and make arrangements, which would cause a delay of a day or two. Chris suggested that the three of them, Nan, Zian, and Xia Meng, should set off first. Ingyu agreed this was the best approach. Zian knew a shortcut, one that could bypass much unnecessary fighting, something she had stumbled upon previously in the dungeon. Despite this, Xia Meng still felt a little worried. Zian gently caressed his face, telling him not to worry and promising to rescue him immediately if danger arose. Nan, standing aside, told Zian to let go. He pulled Xia Meng into his own embrace, declaring that his protection alone was sufficient. The two started bickering again. Xia Meng tried to persuade them that it was best if he didn't go along. Without him as a burden, they could proceed with more peace of mind. Hearing Nin mention the contract to threaten him, Xia Meng wore a look of defiance. Sensing his mood, Nin informed him that starting today, his salary for going out would be doubled. This news left Xia Meng overjoyed. He immediately declared he would obey any command from his master. Nan shot Zian a provocative glance. Xia Meng noticed the gesture. Regarding their squabble, he declared he had no time to deal with those two idiots. He then turned to invite Ingyu and Chris to eat with them. Nan conjured a fireball. In the distance, a violent explosion erupted instantly. Zian released a small demonic beast, testing Xia Meng to deal with it. Xia Meng hesitated, weapon in hand. His attire was fine, but his weapon was actually a frying pan. Looking at the weak little monster on the ground, he really couldn't bring himself to strike. Nin told him that once these monsters attacked collectively, they could leave a person covered in wounds in an instant. Xia Meng hadn't expected this small creature to be so terrifying. Zian ordered him to slay it immediately. Close combat was something Xia Meng simply couldn't manage. Nin thus cast a magic shield around him, one capable of easily repelling even high-level monsters. Zian gave him a push. The dungeon was a place where one needed to fight to survive. Xia Meng cursed them both as devils, then raised the frying pan and approached the monster. He first apologized, then brought the frying pan down hard. Xia Meng decided to use the bird monster thighs captured at noon. For dinner, he first washed the thighs and marinated them for 20 minutes, then coated them in egg white and starch, and finally deep-fried them until golden brown. Just as dinner was ready, they returned. While eating, the two urged him to quickly get used to activating his skills, because later they would encounter even stronger humanoid monsters. The next day, the trio arrived at the dungeon, which consisted of 3 areas: the sky forest, the pool, and the town. Their destination was the town area. Xia Meng didn't understand why they had come to this cliff. Zian explained that it led directly to the pool area. She prepared to fly down with Xia Meng, telling Nen to jump down protected by his magic shield. Nen questioned why, if she could fly down, she wouldn't just take them both. Xian haughtily replied that she had no desire to touch a man's body. Watching the two argue endlessly, Xiaoming calmly analyzed the situation from the side. Eventually, Xian compromised. Since her dragon form was too small, this was the only way she could carry them down. During the flight, the two started bickering again. Xiaoming quickly tried to dissuade them, reminding them they were almost there. Xian was in the middle of making a threat when she was suddenly struck by a rock. Her grip on the two involuntarily loosened. The pair struggled in the water, finally managing to stay afloat. Nan furiously accused Xian. Seeing they were about to start arguing again, Xiaoming quickly reminded them to find a place to change clothes before they got sick. While they were changing, Nin noticed Xian's gaze. Puzzled, he asked why she kept staring at him. Xian asked him if he liked Xiaoming. Nan remained silent for a moment, then retorted, "What's it to you?" He then stated it was perfectly normal for a master to care about his subordinate. She saw the brand on Nan's chest. Could the rumors about his family actually be true? Nan covered the brand on his chest. This mark was merely a constant reminder to him. Suddenly, the two heard Xiaoming's cries for help. A monster had appeared where he was. A water-type magical beast had bound Xiaoming tightly. His body was constricted, unable to move, leaving him only able to call for help. Nan cast a levitation spell to observe the situation. With Xiaoming trapped, the circumstances were somewhat tricky. He reminded Xian to be exceptionally careful when making a move. After the monster was attacked, Xiaoming felt the grip tighten even more forcefully. Nan dived underwater and cast Rock Break. With a loud crash, the monster slammed heavily onto the water's surface, then became still. The two were puzzled by the unexpectedly smooth success, feeling something was amiss. Unexpectedly, the monster's eyes snapped open, launching a fierce attack. Fortunately, the two were alert. Indeed, the creature had been feigning death to lure them in. Xiaoming didn't understand what his companions were doing. His body was squeezed tighter and tighter by the tentacles. He thought grimly that if he were strangled to death by an octopus on Earth, it would definitely make headlines. Immediately after, he cried out tearfully that he couldn't hold on much longer. As soon as the words left his mouth, Xian unleashed a blade of wind, nearly severing the tentacle. Sensing the threat, the monster extended a tentacle to attack Xian, but he was already prepared, swiftly retreating with a scoff. "Want to touch me? You're 10,000 years too early." Xiaoming seemed to have thought of a plan. He asked Nan to immobilize the monster first, then have Xian use a similar magic attack as before, aiming for the spot between its eyes. When the two asked if his method would work, he admitted he wasn't sure. He had dealt with octopuses before and knew how to kill them, but he knew nothing about this monster. The monster continued its fierce assault. With no better options for the moment, the two decided to give a try. Nan handed Xian an eclair to boost his speed. Then, Nan cast Frozen Storm Plains, encasing the monster in ice. The next move was up to Xian. With the eclair held in his mouth, Xian's speed greatly increased. He quickly aimed at the target spot and unleashed Thunder Spear. As the Thunder Spear struck, an extraordinary roar echoed. The monster collapsed instantly. The two hadn't expected victory to come so easily. Immediately, they began searching for Xiaoming. They saw him extend a hand from the pile of tentacles, shouting, "I'm here." Nan hurried over, confirmed he was unharmed, and pulled him out. However, the areas where he'd been constricted still throbbed with pain. When his feet touched the icy ground, he instantly leaped up, clinging tightly onto Nan. This scene left Xian dumbfounded, while Nan wore an indulgent smile, deciding to heal him immediately. After the healing, Nan told him to hold on tight and quickly headed towards the shore. Then, finding the sight unbearable, offered to take over carrying him. However, Nan, in high spirits, ignored him. Finally, Nan successfully carried him to the shore. Once ashore, Xiaoming curiously asked how Nan had discovered the monster's weak spot. Nan explained that an octopus's brain is located between its eyes. Previously, defeating octopus monsters required organizing a team of 20 for a battle of attrition. Hearing this, Xiaoming couldn't help but complain that by the time everyone assembled, he would likely have already perished. Xian remarked that it was truly a miracle they had defeated the giant octopus with just the two of them. Xiao Meng believed this was the power of teamwork. Teamwork meant members complementing each other, growing together, and thus becoming stronger. The two pondered for a moment and decided to continue cooperating in the future, but only in combat situations. Xiao Meng interrupted their argument, suggesting they first find a place to change out of their soaked clothes. Concerned for his safety, Nan suggested setting up a curtain again for changing. Xiao Meng glanced at Xian, looking somewhat uneasy. Nan seemed to notice his apprehension and promised to help him keep an eye on the others. Xian, seeing this, bristled with indignation, insisting he would absolutely not peek. Xiao Meng resignedly asked him to fetch some giant octopus tentacles to serve as the main course for lunch. When the octopus legs were brought back, he first rubbed them with salt to remove the slime, then tenderized the meat with a mallet. Next, he boiled them in hot water, then marinated them with various seasonings for half an hour. Finally, he placed the marinated octopus on the grill to cook slowly. The octopus meat was springy and delicious, truly worthy of a rare monster. After tasting it, Nan found his ice magic had actually doubled in power. He began to look forward to trying other rare monsters. Gazing upon the deserted town, Xiao Meng turned to his companions, a hint of disbelief in his voice as he sought confirmation. He scanned the surroundings, finding them utterly empty, yet a persistent feeling of being watched from the shadows prickled his senses. Suddenly, a chilling gust of wind swept through, sending an involuntary shiver down his spine. He felt a cold, sinister presence. Xiao Meng's thoughts began to spiral, his mind conjuring various terrifying images, as if some dreadful entity was about to reveal itself. Just then, his eyes caught a glimpse of a white figure ahead. Nervously, he tugged at Nan's sleeve, whispering that he thought he saw someone. Nan reassured him, suggesting it might just be a dark spirit, not uncommon in these town areas. This explanation only heightened Xiao Meng's fear, making him desperate to flee the place. Nan told him that using holy magic would dispel them. Just as Xiao Meng wondered who could cast such magic, he felt something strange coiling around him. Seeing this, Nan immediately cast the light of the Holy Spirit upon him. "Rest in peace," he murmured, and the dark spirit behind Xiao Meng dissipated instantly. At that moment, Xian's voice came from the side, asking if perhaps she needed a spell cast on her too. They turned to look and found Xian surrounded by dark spirits. Nan teased that with her abilities, she hardly needed any magic cast for her. Xiao Meng urged everyone to leave the area quickly. Nan gently lifted his chin, telling him not to look at the frightening things. "If you really can't control it," Nan suggested softly, "why not just look at me?" Xiao Meng's face flushed crimson. He hadn't expected Nan to say something like that. Just then, Xian abruptly reached out, shattering the delicate atmosphere between the two. She warned Nan to stay away from her servant, questioning his ill intentions. Nan retorted that he was merely looking after him, unlike Xian, whose heart harbored improper thoughts. Xiao Meng covered his burning cheeks, realizing he didn't actually dislike Nan's actions. His heart was even pounding much faster. After the trio reached their destination, Xian tried to push open the large gate before them, but despite studying it for a long time, she couldn't open it. This door could only be opened by someone possessing the Florikina bloodline. Due to the long journey, they decided to rest nearby. Xiao Meng looked at the fish Xian took out, asking where it came from. Learning it was found inside the giant octopus's ink sac, he grimaced with disgust, telling her to throw it away immediately. The next morning, Xiao Meng carefully prepared a sumptuous breakfast. These foods not only enhanced magical attack power, but also increased recovery speed. Nan instructed him to stay close to the door during the Guardian's battle. He then handed Xiao Meng a teleportation stone, telling him he could retreat via the teleportation formation if things felt dangerous. Xiao Meng watched them with worry. Xian comforted him, saying if they truly couldn't win, they would find a way to escape. The three returned to the large gate from before and placed his hand on the door. It began to glow and then slowly swung open. Upon entering, they found themselves in a water domain. Nan immediately cast a levitation spell. He arranged for Xiao Meng to stay put while he and Xian scouted ahead. During the reconnaissance, Nan sensed something unusual and warned Xian to watch her step. The Guardian was about to appear. No sooner had the words left his mouth than ripples disturbed the water surface. A colossal snake emerged. It was the Guardian. The Guardian attacked first, spewing a torrent of fire towards the pair. An explosion roared, and smoke obscured their vision. Xiaoming cried out their names in alarm. As the smoke cleared, Nan's figure reappeared. He launched fireballs at the Guardian. Hit! The Guardian quickly submerged back into the water. Suddenly, it burst out beside Xian, launching an attack. Nan swiftly pulled her away from the danger zone. Xian specialized in lightning and wind magic, but using lightning might affect everyone present. Hearing about wind magic gave Nan an idea for a countermeasure. On the other side, Xiaoming watched anxiously as the two faced peril, frantically searching for anything useful. Suddenly, he spotted a stone brick. Without hesitation, he picked it up. Channeling attack magic, he hurled the brick at the Guardian. Struck, the Guardian reared back, exposing its underbelly. Xiaoming shouted for them to aim for its belly. Xian reacted instantly, using wind shackles to bind the Guardian and urging Nan to act quickly. Ultimately, they successfully defeated the Guardian. The three proceeded to the core area. Nan smoothly retrieved the water essence, one of the essential materials needed to complete the demon god seal. Xiaoming asked quizzically, "Doesn't the book say it's already sealed?" Nan explained that the seal wasn't complete and would gradually weaken over the years. They had to recollect the materials to reinforce it. Xiaoming felt a bit hesitant upon hearing this. He hadn't expected there to be other dungeons to visit. Next, they would head to the dungeon in the Marlia Kingdom, located near a famous resort destination. The group arrived at the tourist city, witnessing a long queue of people waiting to enter. Even Chris, the first prince of Harelia, had to wait in line with the commoners. Xian expressed his dissatisfaction, suggesting it would be faster to simply climb over the wall. Chris reminded him that doing so would lead to his arrest. To avoid trouble, Xiaoming persuaded him to wait patiently in line. Just then, the surrounding crowd noticed Xian, the dragonoid, and began murmuring amongst themselves. As the one contracted to a dragonoid, Xiaoming suddenly became the center of attention, making him feel slightly uncomfortable. At that moment, a knight approached. He was Dylan Etika, the captain of the 7th Knight Order of the Marlia Kingdom. The Lord had invited Nan and Xian to his residence as guests. The knight led them through a special passage into the city. Listening to the noisy chatter behind him, Xiaoming secretly wished they could enter the city faster. Each of them received an entry permit crystal, which had to be returned upon departure. After entering the city, they began discussing their next steps. Nan and Xian decided to head to the Lord's residence. Chris, meanwhile, needed to go to the military department. He asked Inu whether he would accompany him or stay with Xiaoming. Under Chris's expectant gaze, Inu unhesitatingly chose the latter. Thus, Chris handed him a letter of introduction, telling them to check into him first. Xiaoming worriedly asked if it was all right for Inu not to go, but Inu explained he was merely accompanying them this time and didn't need to attend. With that, he pulled Xiaoming along, hurrying towards an inn to register, looking forward to the journey ahead. After finding an inn, the two booked a detached house. Once settled, they went to the marketplace. The variety of ingredients here surpassed even Ishdatum. There were even items they couldn't find before. Xiaoming excitedly began his shopping spree. After browsing for a long time, both felt thirsty. Inu pointed to a stall ahead, asking him to wait there again while he went to buy drinks. After Inu left, Xiaoming sat down happily, filled with a sense of satisfaction from having bought so many high-quality ingredients. However, just as he was reveling in his delight, someone approached him from behind, inviting him to hang out. Observing the person's attire, he guessed they were guards. Maintaining a calm expression, he decisively refused. From the jeers of the man's followers, he learned that the man holding his hand was named Alinda. After a moment's thought, he confirmed he didn't know him. Seeing the man wouldn't give up and was still holding his hand, he felt a strong aversion. Just as Xiaoming was locked in a stalemate with the newcomer, Nan arrived just in time. He gripped Alinda's hand tightly, demanding to know what he thought he was doing to his companion, and concernedly asked Xiaoming if he was all right. Xiaoming shook his head, saying his hand was just a little red. Ignored by the two, Alinda grew furious, berating Nan as a crude fellow and demanding he let go. However, the next second, a sharp pain shot through his wrist, leaving him utterly shocked. Hearing his cry of pain, Alinda's followers rushed forward, accusing Nin of daring to lay hands on the Lord's eldest son. Nin paid the provocateurs no mind, but seeing the worried look on Xiaomeng's face, he let out a cold snort and released Alinda's hand. Clearly, Alinda had also recognized Nan's identity. Rubbing his stinging wrist, he spat threats, telling Nan to watch his words. Upon hearing Nan's identity, the followers nearby began to mock him, calling him a useless descendant of heroes living off the state's coffers. Listening to their taunts, Xiaomeng couldn't help but find their words exceptionally harsh. Alinda not only failed to stop them, but added fuel to the fire, even remarking how pitiful it was that Nan was the only one left in his family. Then clenched his fists tightly in anger. Hearing this, Xiaomeng was taken aback. Suddenly, Xian's voice cut them off. Seeing that Xian was a dragonoid, the group remembered their orders not to offend dragonoids. Reluctantly, Alinda led his men away. Inyu returned with the drinks, sensed the tense atmosphere, and asked what had happened. Nin didn't want to elaborate, merely explaining they had encountered some tiresome people. Listening to the surrounding whispers, Xian declared he was hungry and suggested they leave. Back at the inn, Xiaomeng prepared sashimi for them. Seeing Inyu about to dig in, Xiaomeng asked him to wait a moment, saying one thing was missing. Then he brought out wasabi. Inyu couldn't quite grasp the connection to dinner. Xiaomeng explained that grinding the wasabi into a paste and eating it with sashimi enhances the flavor. Xian eagerly picked up a piece of sashimi, wanting to taste it immediately. Seeing this, Xiaomeng quickly stopped her, pointing out she had added far too much wasabi. However, Xian ignored his advice, stuffing the entire piece, laden with wasabi, into her mouth. The moment she chewed, the intense heat rushed straight to her head. The next second, flames seemed to erupt from her mouth. Xiaomeng sighed. The usual way, he explained, is to drizzle sauce over the sashimi, then dip it in just a tiny bit of wasabi before eating. You can't eat that much wasabi at once. When you eat it, inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. The pungent kick will be much less intense. Inyu tried a piece following Xiaomeng's method. A sweetness mingled with the spiciness. The taste was fantastic. While the others marveled at the food, only Nan ate quietly by himself. Xiaomeng quietly asked Xian, "What's wrong with Nan?" Xian guessed. He's probably bothered by meeting the Lord earlier today. Their hypocrisy and unpleasantness must have disgusted him. Considering Xian's words, along with the comments from the people on the street, Xiaomeng sensed that Nan's background was quite complex. He unconsciously took a sip of the drink in his hand and was instantly amazed by the taste. It was even more delicious than the fruit vendor had described. He poured a glass for Nan. "It's really good, sweet and refreshing." Suddenly, his eyes widened in shock as he noticed what was actually in the juice. Nan glanced at the fruit in the cup, surprised. How did this get here? He began questioning Xiaomeng about the source of these fruits and how many he had used to make the juice. Xiaomeng thought for a moment and replied, "About 5, I think." Just then, he suddenly felt a wave of heat wash over him. Nevertheless, he continued explaining, "I ran into a very strange vendor today and bought them from him. The vendor told me they found these fruits by chance during their travels and heard that drinks made with them are exceptionally tasty. So I bought 10. Just as Xiaomeng had taken the fruits, patrol guards had arrived, looking furious. Seeing trouble, the vendor grabbed his things and fled. Xiaomeng hadn't even had time to pay. He had appraised the fruit. The results showed it was non-toxic and edible, smelling much like passion fruit. Nan explained, "This fruit has an extremely high alcohol content. Just 2 are equivalent to a whole barrel of wine." Xiaomeng touched his forehead, realization dawning. No wonder he had started feeling dizzy earlier. Immediately after, his body began to sway, and he looked like he was about to collapse. Nan instantly caught him. Looking down, he saw the young man in his arms had already drifted off to sleep. He turned to warn the others to drink less, and asked Inyu to take Xiaomeng back to his room. However, his warning came too late. Xian had already grabbed the container of the drink and was gulping it down heartily, even revealing her dragon form. Inyu and Chris had also drunk quite a bit, but Inyu couldn't hold his liquor as well as Chris. He was already drunk. Surveying the chaotic scene before him, Nan sighed and decided to take Xiaomeng back himself. He carried Xiaomeng back to the room. Just as they neared the bed, Nan suddenly felt a wave of discomfort, his footing unsteady. He accidentally dropped Xiaomeng onto the bed. Hearing the soft sound Xiao Meng made, Nin felt as if bewitched, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. He couldn't stop himself from lifting a strand of Xiao Meng's hair, inhaling its scent while murmuring his name. He gently caressed his cheek. Overcome by an irresistible urge, he leaned down, intending to kiss him. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced his heart. He immediately recoiled, sitting up, wondering if the alcohol had muddled his mind. Nan carefully tucked the blanket around him, murmured good night, and walked out of the room. Night fell, filled with lightning. Thunder roared. A young man ran frantically, driven by fear. He saw bodies strewn everywhere, his heart filled with confusion and incomprehension. He couldn't understand why everyone was dead. He kept running, desperate only to find his father and mother. When he reached a tightly shut door, he heard his parents' voices from within. He pushed the door open, thinking he had finally found them. However, the next second, he witnessed a brutal scene. His father raising a sword and plunging it into his mother. Blood spurted like an arrow. His father then noticed his presence. His fallen mother looked at him in disbelief, unable to comprehend why he was there. Seeing her out-of-control husband about to harm their child, she clung tightly to him, desperately urging her son, "Run, run quickly," and was unwilling to abandon his mother. But just then, Butler Beria appeared behind him, grabbed Nan's hand, and quickly pulled him away from the scene. The butler led Nan to a door, telling him he would be safe once he passed through it, urging him to enter quickly. After Nan went through the door, the butler told him this was as far as he could accompany him. As soon as the words fell, the butler slammed the door shut, telling him to remember he was the last hope of this family. No matter how Nan cried out, the door never opened again. Only a pool of fresh blood seeped out from under the door, just as Nan was heartbroken. A girl appeared beside him, her warmth illuminating his world. This girl was Xiao Meng. However, just as Nan welcomed her arrival with anticipation, a sharp sword pierced through his body. Watching the once lively and lovely young girl fall before him, Nan's world shattered once more. The demonized, Nan caught the falling Xiao Meng. No matter how he struggled, he could not escape the arrangement of fate. In his sleep, Nan's eyes snapped open, startling him awake. He quickly sat up and looked around. The chirping of birds drifted in from outside the window. He clutched his forehead in pain, unable to stop a curse. Damn it. Xiao Meng remembered everyone had drunk last night. So, she decided to make easily digestible food for breakfast. Just as she finished preparing it, Nin walked out. In the morning, she made creamy corn juice. After setting down the food, she told Nin the others hadn't woken up yet. As the two were talking, the others gradually emerged, but she still hadn't seen any sign of Xian. Nan interrupted their conversation, saying they would go to the dungeon after finishing breakfast and cleaning up. However, Xian still hadn't returned. He suggested just leaving a note for her. 3 hours later, they arrived at the dungeon entrance. Xiao Meng looked around in confusion. Aren't dungeons supposed to be underground? This place looked exactly like a forest. Chris explained that due to the falling water level and the rapid growth of vegetation, it had transformed into its current state. Xiao Meng remembered the octopus last time. It was simply a nightmare. Nan explained that it wouldn't be like that here, due to overhunting. This dungeon had already become deserted. However, it wasn't entirely safe. There were still many traps. These were all leftovers from previous hunts. Because the cost of recovery was too high, they were simply abandoned. They arrived at an area where Nan reminded everyone to be careful. This was a concentrated trap zone. He told everyone to wait for his signal before moving. Then, he began using the magic spell Needle Eye technique to scout ahead. Soon, Nan instructed the group to move according to his directions. Inyue and Chris, walking ahead, moved with ease. But Xiao Meng, following behind, detected an unusual sound. It seemed she had stepped in the wrong place. Just as the thought crossed her mind, Inyue sensed danger. A massive wooden stake came crashing down. He leaped up and shattered it with a kick. After landing, Inyue wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, thankful for his quick reflexes. Before Xiao Meng could finish apologizing, another strange sound came from the ground. The two instantly froze, afraid to move. Nin couldn't help but complain that the two were liabilities. Because they had stepped in the wrong spot, they had fallen into another trap. Xiao Meng's body uncontrollably plummeted down a tunnel. Inyue reacted swiftly, grabbing her. Pushing off with his feet, he leaped upwards, using magic to suspend them both against the wall. They barely managed to steady themselves. The moment had been incredibly perilous. Inuit told Xiaoming to hold on tight. He was preparing to climb up. After much hardship, they finally climbed out. Exhausted, Inuit collapsed onto the ground. Xiaoming thanked him sheepishly. If it weren't for his timely rescue, she feared she would have fallen deep into the trap. They looked around. Inuit guessed they were likely inside the dungeon now. She wondered how Nan and Chris were doing. Inuit comforted her, saying that getting separated in places like this was common, so she shouldn't worry too much. Then, Inuit took out a teammate's sensing stone. As long as it was still glowing, it meant the others were all right. Having said that, Inuit drooled slightly at the corner of his mouth. The most urgent matter right now was eating. Only by replenishing enough strength could they press onward. He opened the lunchbox, an involuntary sound of admiration escaping his lips. Elsewhere, Nan awoke to find himself confined within a cage. Beside him, Xian suddenly spoke, giving him a start. It turned out Xian was also caught in this trap. This must be the frenzied demon cage. Within this cage, all abilities were restricted. Magic was rendered almost entirely unusable. Nan examined it for a long time. It seemed their only hope was destruction from the outside. Just then, Xian began to inquire about Xiaoming's whereabouts. Nan informed him that Xiaoming and Inu were in a separate trap. Both traps had sprung simultaneously. As he spoke, he tested the cage, finding it utterly impervious to physical attacks. It's a shame Chris isn't here, Nan mused. Otherwise, he could open this instantly. Xian cut him off, asking if he had anything to eat. Nan fell into a resigned silence for a moment. He passed his own lunchbox over. I can only spare half. Xian snatched the box eagerly and began to devour the contents ravenously. Seeing him satiated, Nan reminded him it was time to contribute. You're still a young dragon. Change back into your dragon form. Maybe you can squeeze through the gaps between the bars. Xian transformed back into his dragon shape, then pushed him towards the bars with all his might. But Xian, having eaten so much, was simply too plump to be pushed through. Nan shoved forcefully against his hindquarters, trying to wedge him out. Xian, however, worried about marring his handsome face, began to whine and refused to cooperate further. Not far off, Xiaoming thought he heard Xian's voice. Inu listened intently, confirming that the sound were indeed emanating from their direction. Meanwhile, Nen was still struggling with Xian, who finally gave up due to the discomfort, reverting to his humanoid form. Xiaoming and Inu, drawn by the commotion, arrived just in time to witness their compromising position, immediately jumping to the wrong conclusion. The atmosphere turned acutely awkward. Inu draped an arm around Xiaoming's shoulders, turning to leave. Carry on. Inu said, we'll come back in a bit. The two youths left behind frantically called after them. It's not what you think. Get back here. Xiaoming grasped the cage bars and, channeling Xian's power, gave a mighty heave. Incredibly, the iron bars began to bend. The two trapped inside felt a cold sweat break out. This being Xian's first time forming a contract, he had accidentally transferred an excessive amount of power to Xiaoming. Even Inu, standing nearby, looked on in astonishment at Xiaoming's staggering arm strength. Xiaoming stood, hands clasped behind his back, letting out a sigh of regret. I still can't use attack magic. Nan interrupted his lament, asking him to prepare some lunch. Xiaoming recalled giving Nan a lunchbox before they set out. He pointed towards Xian. My share was completely devoured by that guy. Xian hadn't made it back to the inn that morning. He'd woken up trapped here and remained so until now. Xiaoming produced his apron, tied back his hair, took out ingredients, and decided to whip up some simple noodles. Noticing the looks of anticipation from Xian and Inu, he resolved to make enough for 4. He sliced green onions and ginger and cut the lotus root into thin pieces. Heating oil in a pot, he tossed in the vegetables, stir-frying them until their aroma filled the air. Next, he added water to the pot. Once it reached a boil, he dropped in the noodles, using the cooking time to fry some eggs on the side. Before long, the noodles were ready. He served the bowls to everyone, reminding them, best eat them while they're hot. Suddenly, a whoosh echoed in front of him as something darted straight for Xiaoming. He let out a startled cry. Everyone's gaze followed his. It was a Jedediah. It had snatched Xiaoming's spatial bag. Seeing Xiaoming's distressed expression, Nen asked what the bag contained. Upon learning it held some utensils and all the remaining food ingredients, the others stared at Xiaoming in stunned silence. Snapping back to reality, They immediately gave chase, attempting to reclaim the spatial bag from the Jedediah. A little later, Inu ran frustrated hands through their hair, complaining, "That blasted Jedediah still got away." "How infuriating." Xiao Meng offered some consolation. "Just let it go." He then asked if the others had managed to bring any ingredients out with them. Hearing they hadn't, he didn't press further. "Well, this is already much better than last time. At least we still have utensils and seasonings. As for ingredients," he continued, "we'll just have to be extra vigilant for anything edible along our path." He then picked up the noodle bowls again, presenting them to the group. "Better eat now. They won't taste as good if they sit too long." Inu explained to Xiao Meng. "That creature, just now, was a Jedediah. They're a type of fiercely competitive wild fowl, notorious for thievery, and they have a particular tendency to target females. Its only strength was its incredible speed. The only way to catch it was to provoke it first. Whether they'd even get another chance to encounter it, Inu couldn't say for sure. The odds weren't high. Just then, a voice called out. It turned out to be Chris, who had followed the sounds and found them, seeing their dejected faces upon his arrival. He couldn't help but ask with confusion what had happened. The next day at noon, Xiao Meng prepared lunch using the shellfish she had gathered along the way. First, she mixed a dipping sauce, then placed the raw oysters on a rack to grill. With her knife, she peeled and diced a pumpkin, then chopped onions and sautéed them until translucent, setting them aside. As she worked beside the fire, she found herself missing the days of having a food processor. Soon, the pumpkin oyster soup and grilled oysters were ready. Looking at the spread, Xian declared it wasn't nearly enough to fill them up. Xiao Meng paid Xian no mind. The others didn't object to helping eat Xian's share. Inue skeptically picked up a piece of oyster. After one bite, Inue's eyes widened in pleasant surprise. The taste was exquisite. The rich garlic aroma didn't overpower the oyster's freshness, but enhanced it beautifully. After lunch, they pressed onward. If the path ahead proved smooth, they would reach their destination soon. Then placed his hand on a door, which slowly swung open. The door's movement alerted the guardian within. It swiftly turned its gaze towards the entrance. Xiao Meng stared at the giant, murmuring, "It's huge," then explained, "It's a giant stone golem." Seeing no immediate threat, the giant stone golem turned and lumbered away. Each step echoed with a tremendous crash, shaking the surroundings. Watching the giant stone golem retreat into the distance, Inwe couldn't help but sigh in relief. Good thing it didn't notice us. A worried expression crossed Inue's face. "Such a powerful monster. Can we really defeat it?" Nan clapped Inue reassuringly on the shoulder. "No problem." Beside them, Xian boasted, "You guys just stay back and watch. The rest of us have got this." Nan looked speechlessly at Xian, unable to resist retorting, "Focus on fighting the monster properly. No slacking off." Seeing Xian's nonchalant attitude, Nan added a reminder, "Don't underestimate it." Having warned Xian, Nan began casting magic shields on everyone. Then, he instructed Chris, "Switch to your highest defense form. Try to draw the giant stone golem's attention." "Got it," Chris affirmed. Then he remembered, the weapon Xiao Meng asked me to make is finished. He took it out and handed it to her. Her weapon was a hammer, designed to serve as both a cooking utensil and a weapon. Chris had specially crafted it to freely switch between large and small forms. It was a masterpiece he was quite proud of. Xiao Meng gave him a thumbs up. "Wow, you really thought of everything." Nan observed that everyone's preparations were complete. "All right," he signaled, "get ready." As a defensive mage, Chris initiated the attack, successfully drawing the stone golem's attention. He felt a jolt of surprise at the sheer power behind the golem, knowing he couldn't afford the slightest carelessness. Astonishingly, the fragments of stone shattering off the golem began to automatically reassemble themselves. Just as the pieces were about to merge back together, Nan decisively unleashed a blazing fireball, striking the coalescing fragments. Instantly, the stones scattered apart again. A red gemstone was revealed, emitting an eerie crimson glow. Immediately, the scattered fragments began to spin, swirling past their bodies and automatically returning to the stone golem, seamlessly merging back into its form. Whenever the stone golem moved, the gem on its back pulsed with a fiery light. Xiao Meng couldn't help but wonder, could this gem be the key to controlling the stone golem? And so, she asked Xian, "Fly me onto its back. I want to test my theory." Though Xian was utterly bewildered, they didn't hesitate, immediately flying Xiao Meng towards the golem. Simultaneously, Nin noticed their maneuver and instantly cast earthen bind to restrain the stone golem. Xiaoming and Xian successfully landed on the stone golem's back. Gripping her weapon tightly, Xiaoming struck unhesitatingly at the gemstone embedded there. Sure enough, the shattered stone fragments stopped reassembling. Xiaoming shouted loudly to the others, "That gem is its weak point." However, her footing became unstable and she tumbled off the stone golem's back. Xian watched nervously as a massive chunk of rock hurtled directly towards her. Xian reacted instantly, shoving Nan aside, only to be struck hard by the massive boulder himself. He spat out a mouthful of blood before collapsing unconscious. Nan immediately directed Chris to protect Xian, telling Yin to advance and attack the gem. He and Xiaoming would provide cover for her. Nan's Baoyin Shu and Xiaoming's hammer struck the stone golem simultaneously, successfully drawing its attention. Yin seized the opportunity, attacking the gem on its back while it was unguarded, shattering it with a single strike. Stones began to crumble and fall from the stone golem's body. One massive boulder hurtled towards Xiaoming. He dodged swiftly. However, the ground beneath his feet abruptly cracked open. He couldn't help but cry out as his body plummeted into the fissure. Nan watched him, tense with anxiety, his heart filled with worry. Xiaoming plunged into the water. Water surrounded him on all sides. He was nearly swept away by the current. A wave of regret washed over him. Why hadn't he learned to swim properly? The water gradually rose above his head. He began to recall various experiences from his life in the real world. From childhood to adulthood, he had always lived according to the wishes of his elders. Even grown up, he was subjected to all sorts of constraints. He couldn't even pursue the one thing he truly loved. Did he truly possess no right to choose? Yet, they always used the excuse that it was for his own good. He had grown weary of this so-called concern. He turned back towards his room, hearing the sounds of accusation from outside. Tears streamed down his face uncontrollably. Submerged, he thought with self-deprecation. If he had just followed their arrangements back then, perhaps he would be leisurely vacationing right now. He felt it becoming difficult to breathe, his chest tight and unbearably constricted. Just as he was about to give up, someone swiftly swam to his side, grasped his hand firmly, and pulled him up from the water. Nan held him tightly, swiftly pressing his lips to his, beginning artificial respiration. Feeling Xiaoming respond, Nan rejoiced inwardly. It seemed he hadn't lost consciousness yet. The two of them couldn't stay like this for long. They had to get ashore as quickly as possible. Holding Xiaoming, Nan swam upwards with all his might. Breaking the surface, he managed to grab hold of a tree branch. Xiaoming clung tightly to him. Gasping fresh air, he couldn't stop coughing. He felt much better after spitting out the water. The two reached the bank safely, then set him down. Xiaoming stumbled upon landing and couldn't help but sneeze. Soaked to the bone, he felt incredibly cold. Since his spatial bag had been stolen, he had no change of clothes. Nan offered him his own clothes. Taking the clothes, Xiaoming was surprised to find that they were so large, he could almost wear them as a dress. After Nan finished changing his own clothes in front of him, he went off to find wood for a fire. Before leaving, Nan reminded him to change quickly. After Nan had gone, Xiaoming's face flushed crimson, his heart pounding. He hadn't expected that a mage would possess such an athletic physique. The two sat chatting idly by the fire. Xiaoming learned they had been washed downstream, now some distance from the underground city. Gnawing on an apple, he asked about the stone golem. He learned that the moment he fell from the edge, the stone golem had collapsed, and wasn't too clear about what happened afterwards either. Nan praised Xiaoming for his excellent performance during the battle. Xiaoming thanked Nan for saving him. Just as he was about to say something more, his mind suddenly went blank. He realized he had just received artificial respiration. Remembering that kiss in the water, his face instantly turned scarlet. Nan noticed something was amiss. He asked him what was wrong. Xiaoming hid his face, evasively claiming nothing was wrong. Inside, however, he was wailing. His first kiss, gone just like that in such a muddled way. Thinking about the oysters they had eaten made him even more distressed. His first kiss actually tasted like roasted oysters, garlic-flavored ones, no less. Night descended. The two urgently needed to find a place to shelter for the night. Xiaoming discovered a cave. They immediately went inside, only to discover, to their surprise, that this was the Jedediah's nest. Fortunately, they not only recovered the spatial bag, but also acquired some delicious chicken. Xiaoming got busy. After cleaning the chicken, he began preparing dinner. He poured oil into the pot, added onions, stir-frying them until fragrant. Next, he added rice and water, letting it simmer until cooked. Then he stuffed the cooked rice into the chicken and sealed the opening with small skewers. Finally, he evenly spread the previously prepared seasoned oil over it. It would need to roast for an hour. Nan was reading when he suddenly heard Xiaoming cry out in alarm. He rushed to his side, asking with concern what had happened. Xiaoming held out a bleeding finger. It turned out he had accidentally cut himself. Nan grabbed his hand without hesitation and put the finger into his mouth, licking the wound clean for him. Xiaoming watched him, his heart pounding. Nan was actually licking his finger. After the bleeding stopped, Nan used magic to heal the wound for him. Listening to his own heartbeat, Xiaoming kept reminding himself that this was just healing, nothing to be embarrassed about. Noticing Nan's gaze, Xiaoming hastily turned away and began preparing dinner, flustered and clumsy. Nan approached from behind, asking with concern if he had caught a cold, why his face was so flushed. His hands were also trembling slightly. Nan took hold of the hand holding the knife, wanting to help. Nan's breath brushed past his ear, and he suddenly felt tense. He dodged Nan's hand, insisting he could manage on his own. He felt they were standing too close, inwardly complaining, why isn't this guy moving away already? In the end, he had no choice but to hand in the portion of food he had prepared, telling him to go eat first. Nan gave him a deep look, then ruffled his hair, telling him to eat and rest early, even though he would be keeping watch tonight. Currently, they were in the downstream area of the underground city. Returning to Atli City would take about a day. After reaching the city, they would still need to take a boat to Adrian Island. Hearing this, Xiaoming already felt somewhat overwhelmed. Suddenly, a monster appeared behind him and lunged. Nan tensely grabbed him, pulling him out of the way, and charged straight at it. However, for some reason, his magic carried black smoke, and his fingernails had also changed. He looked down, trembling, at the black claws on his hands. He cut off the praise from the person behind him and informed Xiaoming that they needed to change their plans. They were going to his other villa. Something was wrong with his body. He needed to go to the villa for treatment. He had already sent a message to Yue and the others, arranging to meet up with them in a few days. Hearing this, Xiaoming stepped forward anxiously, worried if he was sick. Wouldn't it be better for them to go to the city? Nan told him not to ask too many questions. Looking at Nan like this, Xiaoming felt something was off. By evening, they arrived smoothly at the villa. Nan pushed open the door, and the two stepped inside. Xiaoming touched the dust on the furniture, unable to shake off a sense of doubt. How long had it been since anyone lived here? The dust was so thick. Nan's words pulled his wandering thoughts back to reality. He would be staying in his room for the next few days and told Xiaoming not to stray too far from the house. He could do anything else freely, even skip preparing meals for him. Before reaching the room, he reminded Xiaoming again. No matter what sounds came from the room, he was not allowed to enter. He could only wait for Nan to come out on his own. This was an order. As soon as the words left his mouth, he closed the door. Xiaoming stared at the tightly shut door, finding Nan's behavior utterly strange. What exactly was happening? 3 days passed, and Nan still hadn't appeared. Strange noises constantly emanated from the room these past few days, making one wonder what he was doing inside. Xiaoming couldn't shake off his worry and decided to bring him some food. He made a nutritious sandwich. He arrived at Nan's door. Although he told himself to wait for Nan to come out, so much time had passed, and he wasn't sure if Nan had eaten anything. He would just go in, place the food on the table. It would only take a moment. He opened the door to find the room pitch black. It was very quiet. He placed the breakfast on the table, then walked to the window and pulled open the curtains, discovering it had started raining outside. Just then, a figure reflected in the glass. He heard footsteps, turned around in alarm, and uncertainly called out Nan's name. When he saw those blood-red pupils, he couldn't help but take a step back, wondering doubtfully if the person before him was truly Nan. Yet, the voice that came out was undoubtedly Nan's. He trapped Xiaoming between himself and the wall. The Nan at this moment seemed different, terrifying. Xiaoming's hands and feet began to tremble. He realized he couldn't muster any strength. The current Nan kept sniffing his scent. He carried a sweet fragrance. He lifted Xiao Meng's head. The scent emanating from him made his own mind reel. This aroma, so irresistible it made one want to drink it down in one gulp, was simply too wonderful. Xiao Meng didn't understand what the other was saying. Trembling, he asked who he was and demanded to be released. However, the other didn't answer him. He had originally planned to savor him slowly, but the scent was too enticing, making him unable to resist the urge to devour him immediately. Hearing the word devour, Xiao Meng's pupils contracted sharply. He tried to push him away, only to find his strength astonishingly great, making it impossible to shove him off. Nan reached out directly and lifted his chin. He lowered his head. Xiao Meng felt as if he was about to be swallowed whole. Yet, the other merely drew close to his lips, seemingly inhaling something. What on earth was happening? Panicked, he reached out to cover Nan's mouth. He seemed controlled by some force. What was that light that had drifted from his mouth just now? At the same time, he felt his own body growing weak and feeble. Before he could even figure out the situation, his hands were restrained again, pinned above his head. Nin pushed him down onto the bed, demanding he obediently surrender his life force. He shut his eyes in pain, crying out Nan's name, asking where he was, pleading for him to come and save him. Just as Nan was about to feed, he suddenly stopped. His eyes returned to their previous state. He got off Xiao Meng, stumbling backward repeatedly, finally collapsing onto the chair behind him. Hunched over in pain, he asked how Xiao Meng had gotten in. Xiao Meng straightened his clothes and sat up, explaining he had come in because he was worried about him. Then cut him off, questioning why he had trespassed into this room. He had set up a wind magic array, which would nullify magic. Xiao Meng didn't notice his tone, solely concerned about what had just happened to him. However, Nan's cold tone still stung him. He emphasized he was only acting out of concern, but the other replied that it was his private matter. Indeed, between them, they were ultimately just employer and employee. He had overstepped. Nan sensed Xiao Meng's dejection. Clenching his fists, he apologized, saying he hadn't controlled his emotions well earlier and had spoken too harshly. Xiao Meng interrupted him, stating he wasn't wrong. It was his own lack of consideration. In the bathroom, Xiao Meng was helping Nan trim his hair. Nan asked him to cut it shorter. He couldn't help but wonder inwardly. Since Nan was letting him touch his hair, did it mean he still trusted him? Could he interpret it that way? Soon, Xiao Meng finished cutting his hair. Nan undid his clothes, preparing to bathe, telling him to go prepare lunch first. Xiao Meng walked out of the bathroom, his mind still dwelling on how, in this strange world, he had thought he'd found someone he could rely on. How foolish he was. Then he gave himself a pep talk. Don't overthink it, just focus on cooking. Indeed, cooking always lightened the mood. Just as the meal was ready, Nan emerged. Seeing him with his new hairstyle, Xiao Meng felt he looked quite different. Lunch was char siu pork. The meat here was sweet, surprisingly pairing well with the rice. At this moment, Xiao Meng was somewhat distracted, recalling Nan's glowing eyes and fangs from before, now vanished. Suddenly, Nan called his name, making him jump. Awkwardly, he asked if Nan wanted more char siu pork. Receiving an affirmative reply, he immediately got up to prepare another serving. Watching Xiao Meng's retreating figure, a look of loneliness crossed Nan's face. Anyone would be scared by something like that, wouldn't they? Meanwhile, Xian had also arrived. Xian forcefully pushed open the villa door. Xiao Meng wondered why he had come so suddenly, not forgetting to ask with concern about his injuries. However, Xian walked straight past him, cursing furiously, "Bastard!" His fist flew towards Nan, but Nan easily caught it. He had indeed improved significantly. Xiao Meng's life force had become so weak, it must have been his doing. No sooner were the words spoken than another punch landed squarely on Nan's face. He claimed repeatedly he would protect Xiao Meng. Yet something like this had happened. Didn't he know that damage to life force couldn't be healed? Xian became agitated, aggravating the wounds on his body. Seeing his anguish, Xiao Meng quickly stepped forward, urging him to calm down. She explained that it wasn't Nan's fault. She herself had ignored the warnings, leading to this outcome. Xian looked at her, his heart aching. She was the one injured. She didn't need to make excuses for Nan. Suddenly, Xiao Meng felt a piercing headache. Clutching her forehead, she pleaded with Nan to tell the truth, hoping the two would stop arguing. Nan remained silent for a moment. He had indeed diluted her life force. It was an undeniable fact. Just then, Nan noticed her distress, asking with concern what was wrong. But Xian furiously slapped his hand away, ordering him to stay away from Xiao Meng. He declared that he alone was enough for her. As the two argued, she suddenly collapsed to the floor. After carrying Xiaoming back to her room, the two men returned to the living room. Zian, having learned what had transpired earlier, asked Nan if he had anything more to say. Nan gazed at the dessert before him. He told Zian that Xiaoming was merely an ordinary woman. Untrained, she lacked the ability to adequately protect herself. Zian was also aware of his family's affairs. Therefore, Nan hoped that should a similar incident occur again, Zian would be able to protect Xiaoming. If necessary, he was even willing for Zian to kill him and take Xiaoming away. Hearing this, Zian asked curiously why he didn't simply dissolve the contract with Xiaoming. Nan stated that if Xiaoming wished it, he would readily release her from the contract without hesitation. A hint of anticipation colored Zian's tone, as if he were already prepared to receive Xiaoming. Nan clenched his fists, asserting that they had no right to make decisions for Xiaoming. Zian slammed his hand on the table in anger. Xiaoming certainly didn't need a guardian, he retorted before storming out of the room. Hearing the door slam shut, Nan sat there dejected. Xiaoming deserved a much brighter future, and he would only bring her endless pain and fear. After a very long voyage, they finally arrived at Adrian Island. Having checked into a hotel in the evening, Xiaoming began preparing dinner. Pan-seared lamb chops. First, she drained the blood from the chops, washed them thoroughly, patted the surface dry, and let them marinate for about half an hour. Afterward, she added rosemary and seared them for 2 minutes, until both sides were golden brown. Just as dinner was ready, Mingyue appeared, dressed in formal attire, inviting Xiaoming to join her at a special banquet exclusively for women. Xiaoming pondered for a moment, then decided to join the festivities and went to change her clothes. Mingyue gazed at the exquisite dishes Xiaoming had prepared, feeling a pang of regret that she couldn't indulge. She quickly followed Xiaoming, offering to help her change. In the bathroom, Xiaoming soaked in the water, her thoughts drifting to Nan. His baffling behavior, one moment gentle enough to make her heart flutter, the next cold, even terrifying. It was truly incomprehensible. After changing in her gown, Xiaoming sought everyone's opinion. Seeing her dressed like this, both Nan and Zian were undeniably stunned. Zian complimented her, saying she looked lovely and the attire suited her perfectly. He even offered to escort her, concerned for her safety. But Xiaoming assured him she would be quite safe traveling with Mingyue. Nan, who had remained silent until then, reminded the two that women had disappeared in this area before, with the culprit still at large. He urged them to be extremely careful when going out. Since the incident at the villa, Nan had begun to intentionally distance himself from Xiaoming, clearly because of what had happened. Mingyue also vaguely sensed the strange atmosphere that had developed between them. They had seemed perfectly fine before. Nan must have done something. Linking arms with Xiaoming, she reminded her that it was getting late and they should be leaving. Zian, meanwhile, instructed them to return early and to send a message if anything happened. At the banquet, Xiaoming found herself captivated by the delicacies of this world, excitedly taking a bite of a sumptuous dish. However, she noticed a peculiar phenomenon. Everyone was engaged in conversation, yet no one was eating. No sooner had she sat down than Mingyue sidled up, pleased to finally have a chance to chat with her alone properly. Xiaoming held her drink, looking utterly bewildered. Was there anything they needed to discuss privately? Of course, girl talk, Mingyue declared, then asked, quite unexpectedly, "Did you dump Nan?" Startled by the abrupt question, Xiaoming sprayed out the drink she had just sipped. She began coughing violently, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes as she hastily clarified to Mingyue that she was mistaken, that nothing of the sort had happened. There was no question of dumping anyone. Mingyue looked astonished. The atmosphere between the two had certainly invited speculation, but perhaps she had read too much into it. Yet, seeing Xiaoming's unnatural expression, Mingyue concluded that Nan must have done something to her. Gently pulling Xiaoming closer, she urged her to recount what had happened, promising she would help her get even. At that very moment, back in their lodgings, Nan inexplicably felt a sudden chill and couldn't suppress a sneeze. Xiaoming recalled Nan's abnormal behavior, confessing the truth frankly to Mingyue. Those few days, Nan had locked himself in his room, his entire demeanor somewhat different from usual. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but hug herself tightly. Mingyue obviously knew what Xiaoming was referring to. After all, she had grown up with Nan since childhood. Xiaoming put down her cup, her expression slightly forlorn. She felt Mingyue ought to know something about Nan's condition, yet she had never revealed even a hint of it to her. She told Mingyue that she had entered Nan's room not expecting the other woman's shock that she had emerged completely unharmed. Xiao Ming quickly waved her hand, suggesting perhaps it was just her luck. Maybe Nan had happened to return to normal right at that moment. Xiao Ming desperately wanted to know what exactly was wrong with Nan. Mingwei sighed. Seeing Xiao Ming's worried expression, Mingwei decided to tell her the truth, but admonished her to keep it locked away in her heart after hearing it, never to leak it out. Nan was undergoing demonization. It was a curse unique to their family. 900 years ago, during the Great War between gods and demons, the Dylan continent faced the crisis of being overrun by the demon race. Experts from various nations joined forces to seal the demon god. Just as the seal was about to be completed, the leader of the demon race inflicted a curse upon the leader of the allied forces at the time, Florizina Hill, that is, Nan's ancestor. The curse would cause him to slowly demonize, transforming into a demon. Those afflicted by demonization cannot control themselves. Thus, a special demon sealing room was established to imprison those undergoing the transformation. So, whenever Nan's demonization occurred, he would lock himself in that room, forbidding anyone from approaching, lest he harm those he cared about. Having recounted all this, Mingwei turned her head and asked Xiao Ming, "Was Nan angry?" "His anger proves he cares about you, that he's afraid of you getting hurt." Xiao Ming, puffing her cheeks slightly, told Mingwei that what frustrated her most was Nan saying nothing, even claiming she didn't need to know, always speaking in riddles. At that very moment, back in her lodgings, Nan sneezed repeatedly. Xian, somewhat disgusted, told him to keep his distance. Mingwei comforted Xiao Ming, telling her not to be angry, and mentioned that the baron at the banquet was a handsome man capable of making all the women in the city swoon. He would invite the most beautiful woman into the palace to dine with him. This filled Xiao Ming with curiosity about the baron's appearance. Mingwei was going to pick flowers. Xiao Ming didn't want to accompany her, deciding to stay put and wait for her return. Not long after Mingwei left, the banquet venue suddenly buzzed with excitement. It turned out Baron Bell himself had made an appearance. Xiao Ming sized him up. He was indeed dashing and handsome, but surely not enough to provoke such a frenzied reaction. Just then, the Baron walked up to her, extending his hand, inviting her into the palace. As Xiao Ming met the Baron's gaze, she felt as if she had been enchanted, mechanically placing her hand upon his. To receive the Baron's invitation was her honor. Upon returning home, Mingwei frantically asked if Xiao Ming had come back yet. Seeing her state, Nin immediately stood up, asking with concern what exactly had happened. Mingwei explained in a panic that the two had briefly separated along the way, and when she returned, Xiao Ming was nowhere to be found. Nan, in a quiet voice, comforted her, telling her to calm down and think about where Xiao Ming might possibly have gone. Mingwei gradually composed herself, then suddenly remembered that Xiao Ming might have been invited into the palace. A beauty pageant gala was being held there, and the winner would have the chance to stay and tour the palace. And the Baron would select the most outstanding one among these beauties to dine with him. Nan pondered for a moment. If that were truly the case, Xiao Ming would have left a message. He turned to Xian, asking if he could sense Xiao Ming's location. Xian replied that he could only perceive a general direction. She seemed to be near a luxurious and spacious building to the northeast, more specifically, perhaps in an underground cellar. Xian felt that Xiao Ming was physically unharmed, but he vaguely sensed that something was amiss. That place happened to be the venue for the gala. If she had been invited, why would Xiao Ming be in a cellar? It was truly perplexing. Mingwei clenched her fists, blaming herself endlessly, regretting her insistence on attending that gala. Nan gently stroked her head. This was an accident. No one could have foreseen it. You don't need to blame yourself. The urgent task now is to figure out how to find Xiao Ming. Xian interjected confusedly. Why don't we just break in and look for her? Then called him an idiot. Forcibly entering the Baron's palace would not only stir up trouble, but also threaten Xiao Ming's safety. Mingwei had a flash of inspiration, outlining a plan to infiltrate stealthily without alerting anyone. However, this plan required them to make a small sacrifice. They needed to disguise themselves to attend the gala. Hearing this proposal, the three reacted differently. Xian didn't even grasp the deeper implications. Time was pressing. Mingwei had no other option but to resort to this strategy. She handed over the gala attire. Nan, however, backed away repeatedly, unwilling to put on this set of clothes. Mingyue scolded him, asking why he was being shy. Didn't they often play like this as children? If he could think of a better way, he wouldn't have to wear it. But had he thought of one? As Mingyue spoke, a hint of menace touched her expression. She even brought up the previous incident with Xiaoming, subtly reminding him she hadn't settled the score over that yet. Nan hastily waved his hands, begging her not to come closer. Chris clung desperately to a pillar. Why did he have to be the first one tortured? Mingyue told him to take a deep breath and cut the chatter. The next second, she tightened his waistband, nearly leaving Chris breathless. Next came the makeup, a task that proved rather time-consuming. Mingyue urged everyone to hurry. She produced several buns, telling each man to take 2 and stuff them into their chests. Once everyone had donned their wigs and their hairstyles were arranged, Mingyue had them stand up and walk around a few times so she could inspect their overall appearance. Nan projected a calm, steady, noble, and elegant mature beauty. Chris, on the other hand, radiated the pure, gentle, and endearing grace of a proper lady. Xian embodied the enigmatic, outwardly cool, but inwardly passionate Gothic Lolita style. Their transformations were nothing short of perfect. Mingyue thought wryly, what was wrong with men these days? Were they even giving others a chance? They stepped into the banquet hall. Nan, in agony, sat down off to the side, wondering why women always chose such difficult shoes to wear. Mingyue slapped him directly, scolding him for his unladylike posture. Xian, however, devoured the food with gusto. He sensed the presence of magic here. Seeing this, Mingyue angrily pointed out Xian's utterly uncouth table manners. Although Xian ate heartily, he still managed to complain that it couldn't compare to Xiaoming's cooking. Chris curiously asked if all Dragonkin ate this much. Mingyue sighed, wishing they could learn from Chris's poise and elegance. Chris quickly explained that it was all thanks to his etiquette teacher. Xian announced he sensed a demonic presence. The atmosphere instantly grew tense. Mingyue pressed Xian, asking if he was certain. Xian affirmed, stating the aura was very familiar to him. But hadn't the demons been driven out long ago? Could this be a remnant from the magic wall incident 9 years prior? There was definitely something amiss at this banquet. Just then, the banquet hall buzzed with excitement due to the arrival of the Lord Baron. The 3 men were rather unimpressed by the Baron's entrance. But Mingyue gazed adoringly at Lord Bell, leaving Chris heartbroken beside her. Nan watched the ecstatic Mingyue and snapped his fingers lightly. Only then did she regain her senses, feeling embarrassed by her lapse in composure. Nan explained she had fallen under the Baron's charm spell. At that moment, the Baron approached, took Nan's hand, and simultaneously invited Chris and Xian. The 3 of them had earned the privilege of entering the palace. Nan watched the Baron kiss his hand, and a wave of nausea washed over him, goosebumps prickling his skin. He noticed the gleam of high-level charm magic in the Baron's eyes. Feigning enchantment, he pretended to be honored to accept Lord Bell's invitation. Mingyue watched their departing figures and began to doubt herself. Was she not beautiful enough? Inside the palace, the Baron was in high spirits, having reaped such a harvest of beauties today. He lifted Nan's chin, his gaze filled with admiration. He praised Nan as being like a dazzling star in the heavens, even wrapping an arm around his waist. This infuriated Nan. He fought the urge to kill him on the spot. Behind him, the other 2 heard the Baron call Nan little darling and couldn't help but snicker, then glanced back, warning them to hold it in, not daring to let out a sound. They stepped into the Lord Baron's collection room. The sight before them was staggering. Living bodies were sealed within demonic mirrors, a magic unique to the demon race. Suddenly, Nan spotted Xiaoming's figure. Xian sensed she was unharmed for now. She was on the verge of being completely sealed. The Baron intended to deal with her first, then dress them up exquisitely. Then violently grabbed the Baron's shoulder, slamming him to the ground. He demanded to know what the Baron intended to do to Xiaoming, and why there were so many demonic mirrors here. The Baron lay on the floor, his body racked with sharp pain, confused as to how Nan had remained unaffected. Nan explained that his charm magic was ineffective against him. The Baron, incredulous, shifted his body and looked up at Nan, sighing in admiration. Truly a perfect angle. It really stirs one's desires. Hearing these shameless words, Nan kicked out, unexpectedly knocking the man unconscious. Just then, an eerie energy emanated from the Baron's body, demanding to know who dared disturb its affairs. The demon realized they were men disguised as women, growing even more furious, and launched an immediate attack. Facing the blow, Nan, thinking of Xiaomeng behind him, didn't dodge and took the hit directly. As Xian launched his attack, he tried to guess his opponent's identity, but the creature's speed surpassed his own. The demon hadn't expected any dragon people to still be alive. It had assumed the Great War 900 years ago had wiped them out entirely. Since one remained, it decided then and there to ensure the dragon people vanished completely. Nan immediately cast a freezing spell, encasing the demon in ice. The creature was stunned. It couldn't believe it had been frozen within its own barrier. Only then did they realize they were trapped inside its domain, which explained why they hadn't been able to unleash their full power. The demon shattered Nan's ice spell. Noticing Nan's profusely bleeding wound, which showed no signs of closing, it sneered. The taste of a curse isn't pleasant, is it? Seizing the moment while the demon was distracted, Chris lunged forward, striking true. Stabbed, the demon recognized the holy weapon in Chris's hand. It hadn't anticipated encountering royalty here. Wiping blood from the corner of its mouth, the demon shrugged. A pity, but ultimately irrelevant. It didn't need these magic mirrors anyway. It had already found something far superior. With that, the demon flickered and vanished from sight. Xian clutched his chest, cursing, "Damn it, he got away." All around them, those who had been controlled by the nightmare collapsed. They had to leave immediately. Nan swept Xiaomeng into his arms, instinctively murmuring her name. In her slumber, Xiaomeng seemed to hear Nan's voice. Her eyes fluttered open, and she gasped, finding herself gazing up at an incredibly beautiful woman. Someone beside her explained, "This is the cellar. You were brought here after being hypnotized by the nightmare." Xiaomeng's eyes widened as she studied the lovely young woman, a nagging feeling of familiarity tickling her mind. Just then, Xian ripped the wig from his head. "Now that she's all right, we should head back." Xiaomeng was utterly stunned. The beautiful girl was Xian? No wonder she looked so familiar. Her gaze shifted to the stunning older sister holding her. Could it be Nan? Just as she was about to cry out, Nan clamped a hand over her mouth. "We had to do this to blend in and rescue you," he whispered. Xiaomeng grasped Nan's hand, thanking everyone sincerely. Then she saw the blood staining his skin. "Why aren't you using magic to heal yourself?" she asked, worried. Nan pulled his hand back, dismissing her concern. "It's nothing serious. A few washes with holy water back home will fix it." Xian scoffed. "Nothing serious? The wound won't even close, and you say it so lightly." "That nightmare we encountered just now was no mere underling," Xian continued. "Its attacks carry potent curses, and that curse has already seeped into your body. A curse-inflicted wound can't be healed by simple means." Xiaomeng looked terribly anxious. She reached towards Nan's injury, urging him, "Hurry and use the holy water." Then, her concerned gaze shifted to Xian. "Are you hurt too?" Then caught her hand. "Now isn't the time. People are starting to wake up. We need to leave." Just then, the Baron groaned, rubbing his head as he regained consciousness, looking utterly bewildered about why he was there. The sound of Nan's voice drew the Baron's attention. He stumbled over, throwing his arms around the disguised Nan and declaring passionately, "Your graceful figure shines like the stars in heaven." Nan visibly bristled, his patience wearing thin. This was getting incredibly annoying. He turned to Xiaomeng. "Give me the spatial pouch. I need to get something." Confused, Xiaomeng handed it over, watching with even greater puzzlement as Nan retrieved an object. Nearby, the Baron, still oblivious to the impending danger, continued his effusive praise of Nan's disguised beauty. Then finally snapped. He swung the frying pan with all his might, sending the Baron flying. Ah, that felt much better. He wasn't worried about being caught. Once he removed the makeup, the Baron wouldn't have a clue who he was. Xian urged them onward from the side, desperate to get back and shed his current attire. Xiaomeng, however, protested, "But you look so good. It's a shame to take it off so soon. Can't you wear it a little longer?" Regarding the Baron's kidnapping of women, Chris and Mingyue, being present, needed to stay behind to conduct a thorough investigation. Consequently, Xiaomeng, Nan, and Xian departed alone, heading towards the misty forest. As they traveled, Xiaomeng carefully tended to Nan's wound, apologizing profusely. "It's my fault you ended up in that situation." Xian quickly reassured her, "You're one of us. Of course, we'd come rescue you if you were in danger." Nan gently touched the treated injury. Aided by the holy water and Xiaomeng's specially prepared rations, The wound was already healing rapidly. Listening to their comforting words, Xiao Ming clenched her fists tightly. If only I knew magic, she thought bitterly, I wouldn't have been charmed. Then they wouldn't have had to fight that nightmare, and Nan wouldn't have been cursed. Nan seemed to read her thoughts. That magic specifically targets females. Even if you mastered the strongest spells, you couldn't have resisted that nightmare's enchantment. Xian chimed in. Even Mingyue was charmed back there. You should have seen how ridiculous she looked. As dusk began to settle, Xiao Ming stood up to prepare dinner. She waved off Xian's offer to help, knowing he'd likely be more hindrance than assistance. She took out dough that had already fermented twice, expertly portioned and deflated the pieces before rolling them into flat, round discs. Placing the dough onto a pan, she began to bake it over their campfire. After 5 minutes, she spread a layer of her special pizza sauce over the golden base. She sprinkled shredded cheese and chopped ingredients, then added another layer of cheese before continuing to bake it until golden brown. Xiao Ming yearned to become stronger. Lost in thought, she didn't notice the figure behind her. She wished she could become powerful instantly. Behind her, the nightmare heard her thoughts, a sinister smile spreading across its lips. Soon, the pizza was ready. She urged everyone to try it while it was hot. Xian and Nan stared at the stringy, gooey flatbread with astonishment. Xiao Ming explained it was called pizza, one of the most popular foods in her homeland. After dinner, everyone gathered around the fire. Xiao Ming sat listening to the two men talk, and before she knew it, she started yawning. She startled awake, realizing she had just dozed off, then told her to go rest first. She wouldn't need to keep watch tonight. Seeing her hesitation, Xian also persuaded her to sleep. There weren't any powerful demonic beasts around here. He and Nan would take turns keeping watch. Xiao Ming was indeed quite tired. Wishing them good night, she went to rest. After she fell asleep, a glowing mass quietly entered her mind. In her dream, she arrived at a place that felt strangely familiar. Someone softly asked if she desired power. He had the ability to grant her immense strength, as long as she was willing to meet his conditions. Her wish could then be fulfilled. Nan heard her pained murmurs. Xian, too, was disturbed by the sounds, unable to sleep. Then noticed the magic sigil on her forehead. Clearly, a nightmare was at work. He clenched his fists, cursing under his breath. Several days had passed, and none of them had noticed this. Xian had also vaguely sensed Xiao Ming's unusual anxiety and intense mental fluctuations over the past few days. Coupled with the previous incident, the nightmare had found an opportunity to invade Xiao Ming's inner world. They had to wake her up as soon as possible. But it's difficult for someone controlled by a nightmare to wake up on their own, unless the nightmare withdraws voluntarily. Nan decided to enter her inner world to expel the nightmare. Seeing Xian's puzzled expression, he explained that he had learned this type of magic before, but wasn't sure if it would succeed. He needed Xian to stabilize Xiao Ming's mental state as much as possible. Xian agreed, but he was more worried about Nan's physical condition. Nan assured him that as long as Xian could keep her stable, his chances of success would greatly increase. Xian urged him to withdraw immediately if the situation changed. They would find another way. Nan told him not to worry and entrusted Xiao Ming's mental fluctuations to him. He stepped into Xiao Ming's inner world, finding the architectural style there bizarre. The clothes on his body also felt uncomfortable. However, strange things appearing in a dreamscape was to be expected. Just then, a voice called out, inviting the bride to prepare at the entrance of the hall. Curious, he walked closer and was shocked to find that the bride there was Xiao Ming. Nan shouted her name desperately from outside the door, watching helplessly as she was about to step into the wedding hall. Frantic, he looked around and saw what seemed to be a passage ahead that he could cut through. He hurriedly chased after Xiao Ming, calling her name. Finally, he caught up. He urgently asked her where exactly she was going. Xiao Ming replied that she had to complete the wedding ceremony. Nan's eyes filled with confusion, but Xiao Ming abruptly pulled her hand away. She stated firmly that only by completing the ritual could she obtain the thing she yearned for. Nan watched her, thinking to himself, nightmares usually used endless horrific visions to imprison their victims, thereby controlling their minds and bodies. But here, the situation was the complete opposite. He quickly grabbed Xiao Ming's arm, demanding to know what she truly wanted to obtain. Xiao Ming retorted, did he even need to ask? Power, of course. As long as she completed the ritual with him, he would grant her the power she desired. In the group, she always felt like a burden, always needing others' protection. She didn't want to be the one protected anymore. She wanted to become strong enough to protect others. then held on to her tightly. The price was too great. Wouldn't she regret it? But Xiao Meng resolutely shook off his hand. The ceremony was about to begin. She determinedly continued forward. Nan yelled after her, trying to wake her up, telling her it was just a dream, not to let the dream control her thoughts. Just then, a bright light shone over. It was Xian from outside the dream, warning him. Xiao Meng's mental fluctuations were becoming increasingly violent. If this continued, he wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. He urged Nan to hurry. Time was clearly running out. There was no other way. He would have to resort to force. The officiant was reciting the vows. Nan stared in astonishment. The person performing the wedding ceremony with Xiao Meng. Why was it him? Just then, the officiant repeated the vows to Xiao Meng once more. Xiao Meng didn't know why she suddenly hesitated. She thought, as long as she completed the ceremony with him, she could immediately become stronger. Xiao Meng seemed to have figured something out. She lifted her head, her gaze resolute. Just as Xiao Meng was about to nod in agreement, Nan rushed over frantically and grabbed her. Her body involuntarily leaned backward. Nan quickly caught her, determined to stop her from agreeing to the other party. He stared intently at her, his voice firm. She was already his. Had she forgotten? Under her incredulous gaze, he told Xiao Meng that she was irreplaceable in his heart, the most important person. Hearing these words, Xiao Meng's heart pounded violently. He continued telling her that the reason he protected her wasn't because of some promise, but because he didn't want her to suffer any harm, not even the slightest bit. He looked earnestly at Xiao Meng. She could rely on him more. The nightmare cursed, striking out at him with an angry palm. Nan was hit, his body crashing into something behind him. This time, it had been just one step away from success, only to be interrupted at the critical moment. The nightmare looked at the furious Nan and recognized him. It was that pervert who pretended to be a woman last time to deceive it. Now he was here again, ruining its plans. Hearing its accusation, Nan retorted furiously that being hugged and kissed by it had ruined his appetite for days. Who was the real pervert? Beside them, Xiao Meng wore a horrified expression. What on earth had she missed while she was unconscious? The nightmare clutched its chest, realizing this woman had woken up. It had to revert to its original form. It instantly vanished from Xiao Meng's dreamscape. Now, affected by the loss of control over the dream, the nightmare was weakened. This was a perfect opportunity to use magic to drive it out. However, the magic he used the next second dissipated within the dreamscape. It seemed magic couldn't be used here. Only physical combat was possible. Nan lunged at the nightmare, but was blocked. The nightmare seized his arm and threw him over its shoulder, slamming him onto the ground. Nan's body crashed heavily onto the crystal platform. He spat out a mouthful of blood. The nightmare lifted its foot, intending to stomp on Nan's injured arm, its attitude utterly arrogant. Wasn't this gifted scent quite nice? Xiao Meng rushed forward angrily, grabbing the nightmare, demanding it release Nan immediately. The nightmare kept its foot on Nan, a mocking smile playing on its lips, taunting the magic-less Nan, claiming he was no match for it all. Hearing Xiao Meng tell it to release him, a cunning glint flashed in the nightmare's eyes. It grabbed Xiao Meng's hand. Releasing Nan was certainly possible, but the condition was that she must complete this ritual with it immediately. Xiao Meng looked at the unconscious Nan, her heart filled with struggle. Seeing her hesitation, the nightmare pulled her fiercely into its embrace, tempting her that completing this ritual would not only grant her immense power, but it would also spare Nan. It threatened Xiao Meng to make her decision quickly, as its patience was limited. Xiao Meng took a deep breath and resolutely rejected the nightmare's temptation. Then, she struggled forcefully, breaking free from the nightmare's control. Under the nightmare's disbelieving gaze, the magic sigil on her forehead cracked. She looked at the nightmare, furiously rebuking this demon that only harmed those she cared about. Get out of my dream. Suddenly, a dazzling power emanated from Xiao Meng's body, a force strong enough to break through the nightmare's magic. She carefully helped Nan up, expressing guiltily that if she could use magic, Nan wouldn't have ended up in such a wretched state. The wound he had just managed to heal had split open again, and it was for her sake. If only she could be a little stronger. Nan gently pulled her into his embrace, telling her not to feel guilty about it. For him, wounds sustained for her were badges of honor. Besides, he needed her. Just now, she had single-handedly broken through the nightmare's magic and driven it out. So, she wasn't weak at all. She had to believe in herself. In the forest, Xian saw and opened his eyes and finally couldn't hold on any longer, collapsing to the ground. After staying up all night, he was so tired his eyelids kept drooping. Nan turned, wanting to shift his position, but unexpectedly met a stinging flying fist head-on, followed immediately by an invincible leg sweep that could break intestines, and was left completely disoriented. Only then did he remember there was still a Xiao-ming with exaggerated sleeping habits beside him. Xiao-ming was awakened by the sunlight. Seeing Nan beside her, she yawned, saying she was still a bit sleepy. She picked up her blanket, telling Nan it felt like she had a very long dream. She hugged the blanket, her eyes darting away, not daring to look directly at him, because the him in the dream had told her that, to him, she was the irreplaceable, most important person. Thinking of this, her face flushed crimson. She quickly buried her face in the blanket. Nan saw her reaction and looked away awkwardly, softly telling her it was just a dream. She shouldn't mind it too much. Xiao-ming thought to herself, how could she have such a dream? Dreaming of Nan saying things to her that sounded like a confession. Just as he was about to get up and leave, Nan called out to him. Then he placed something around his neck. It was a magic necklace, consecrated by sacred rites, capable of protecting him from demonic attacks. Xiao-ming discovered with surprise that it was a ruby pendant, and hidden within it was a magic array. Clearly, this was no ordinary necklace. Thinking this, she turned to look at Nan, expressing that she couldn't accept something so valuable. Nan, however, looked at her earnestly. To him, her life was far more precious than this necklace. Xiao-ming stopped refusing, saying she would treasure the necklace. Nan reminded her again not to take it off. Suddenly, he remembered Xian's teasing gaze and urged Xiao-ming to hide it well, ensuring no one saw it, especially not that incredibly annoying fellow, Xian. Much later, Xiao-ming would learn that this necklace was actually an heirloom from Nan's mother, her most cherished treasure. On the other side of the forest, the nightmare clutched its chest. It hadn't expected Xiao-ming to be capable of injuring it so severely. It wondered just who she was, especially being someone possessing dual souls. Adding to that the man with the unique hair, color, and eyes, things are becoming increasingly interesting. Today, Xiao-ming decided to challenge herself by making pancakes from scratch. She carefully separated the egg whites, then added sugar and began to whip them. During this process, her thoughts drifted to the ruby she wore around her neck. That gem, known as the Stone of Love, shone with a fiery, passionate light, symbolizing the beauty, eternity, and faithfulness of love. A faint blush crept onto Xiao-ming's cheeks. Although she knew the gem was primarily for her protection, its symbolism still stirred ripples in her heart. She shook her head, deciding to stop letting her thoughts wander. She focused intently on continuing to make the pancakes. After finishing the pancake preparation, Xiao-ming couldn't help but start thinking about other foods. Unconsciously, she picked up a knife and sliced a sausage, then pierced it with toothpicks. She arranged it into a heart shape. She couldn't help but wonder what was wrong with her. Just as Xiao-ming brought out the predominantly sweet meal, Xian happened to wake up. She handed Nan a pancake, confident he would enjoy its soft, delicate texture. Besides, sweets could help alleviate fatigue and restore energy. A slight smile touched the corner of Nan's lips. He hadn't expected Xiao-ming to know his preferences so well. Beside them, Xian teased him, asking if a big man like him actually liked eating sweets. Wasn't he worried about gaining weight? This remark angered Xiao-ming so much she nearly bent the fork in her hand. She retorted that enjoying sweets wasn't limited by gender or age. As a sweet lover with a tendency to gain weight easily, she firmly believed that as long as consumed in moderation, sweets wouldn't affect one's health. Nan watched helplessly as the two bickered. He picked up his plate and began to enjoy the food. He could only hear Xiao-ming continuing to argue that these pancakes possessed an irresistible charm, capable of making even those who usually dislike sweets unknowingly devour several servings. The fog in the forest today was somewhat heavy. Nan reminded everyone to stay close to the group and not get separated. Behind him, Xian complained, asking if he had taken a wrong turn, feeling like they had been wandering in circles for a long time. Nan suppressed his irritation and asked if he had any better suggestions. Just then, Xiao-ming seemed to step on something. "Is this a magic circle?" she exclaimed. Xiao-ming rubbed her eyes. In disbelief, she found herself seeing butterflies and flowers, even patches of blue leaves. Just moments ago, it had clearly been an autumn scene. Xian also felt a wave of confusion. Could this be some kind of illusion? Then carefully observed their surroundings. They had finally found the place. At that moment, Xian excitedly pointed in one direction. There lay a massive gemstone, then followed his gesture and saw something flickering inside the gem. He quickly warned everyone to pay attention to what was hidden beneath the gem. Suddenly, the thing inside the gem emerged. It was a phantom singing butterfly. Sensing their presence, the phantom singing butterfly immediately launched a fierce magical attack. Strange objects began to sprout from the ground. Nan, with swift reflexes, pushed Xiaomeng aside. However, he himself was firmly bound by those objects. Xiaomeng looked towards him in worry, her heart filled with anxiety. The phantom singing butterfly immediately launched a second attack towards Xiaomeng. In that critical moment, Xian instantly flashed before Xiaomeng, wielding her magic to block the attack. However, Xian suddenly noticed a cloud of black mist spreading out before her. It was the phantom singing butterfly's hypnosis. Nan anxiously warned her to quickly leave the area of black mist. Unfortunately, it was too late. Xian couldn't evade in time. She fell directly into Xiaomeng's arms. Xiaomeng looked at the unconscious Xian, her heart burning with anxiety, and could hardly believe what he was seeing. At such a crucial time, Xian had actually fallen asleep. Nan reminded Xiaomeng that this kind of hypnosis wasn't easily broken. He firmly believed he could awaken Xian, so he employed his secret technique. He began applying pressure points to Xian. The sleeping Xian suddenly cried out and sat up abruptly. Xiaomeng was overjoyed. He had succeeded. However, just then, with her back turned to the phantom singing butterfly, she was completely unaware of the danger quietly approaching from behind. The two urgently shouted Xiaomeng's name, trying to warn her of the danger behind her. Xian quickly reached out and pulled her over, but it was still a step too late. The clothing on Xiaomeng's arm was slashed by something sharp. Blood seeped from a wound. Nan gritted his teeth and struggled fiercely to break free from whatever was binding him. He waved the magic in his hand, and a stream of fire swept towards the phantom singing butterfly, engulfing it tightly. Seeing this, Xiaomeng charged forward without hesitation and grabbed the phantom singing butterfly. Using her magic, she slammed it hard onto the ground. Nan seized the opportunity to tear off the bindings wrapped around him. At the same time, he loudly warned Xiaomeng not to act rashly. This magical creature was extremely dangerous. Xiaomeng had just stood up when she sensed something wasn't quite right. Ignoring the shouts from behind her, she threw a heavy punch forward. However, the phantom singing butterfly unexpectedly dissolved into scattered flower petals. Just as Xiaomeng stood there stunned, dense petals obscured her vision. When she opened her eyes again, the phantom singing butterfly had transformed into a moth, flapping its wings and flying high. Could this be its true form? Xiaomeng wondered inwardly, then forcefully threw a fireball towards a moth in the air. A loud roar echoed in the sky, sparks flying everywhere. Nan walked over and picked up a lock of Xiaomeng's hair that had been singed. He asked her gravely, "Do you know how dangerous that was just now? If Xian and I had been even a step later, you might not have gotten away with just this minor injury." Xiaomeng lowered her head, explaining guiltily that she just wanted to contribute more in the fight. Nan looked at her deeply, his tone serious. He hoped that in the future, she would consider her own safety before acting. Faced with Nan's stern gaze, Xiaomeng remained silent for a moment before finally nodding to show she understood. Sensing her change in mood, Nan sighed helplessly. He softly told her that he worries about her safety. He gently patted Xiaomeng's head. He gestured for her to go change into clean clothes first, and they could trim her hair once they reached the city. Watching Xiaomeng's receding figure, Nan turned to face Xian, his expression grave. He had something to discuss with her. When Xian turned to look at him, Nan pointed aside. "Let's talk over there." Xian knew in her heart that what Nan wanted to discuss must be about Xiaomeng, especially concerning the power that had suddenly surged within her during the battle earlier. Based on Nan's observation, Xiaomeng didn't seem to be controlled by someone else. That golden power he had never seen before. Could it have been granted to her by Xian? Xian told him that the only thing she had bestowed upon Xiaomeng was physical attack power. If it were magical power, it should be wind and lightning elements, just like his. Moreover, she couldn't use attack magic at all. This had been verified before. It also didn't seem like the nightmare was responsible, as the aura emanating from her didn't resemble dark magic. She can create food that grants beneficial effects and awaken people from magical corruption. What exactly is Xia Meng's origin? Nan sighed. It seemed best for them to wait and see. Once we return to the kingdom of Halaya, we can consult the palace records to see if there's any related information. Xian agreed. For now, that seemed the only course of action. Xia Meng watched the two figures in the forest, wondering why they needed to speak privately. He undid his hair. Fastening his clothes, he pondered for a moment before deciding to make pan-fried fish. It had been a while. He believed Xian would surely be delighted. He cleaned the fish thoroughly, removing the innards before washing and drying it. He sprinkled it with salt and cooking wine, adding a few slices of ginger to marinate for half an hour. Using this time, he began preparing chawanmushi. Before long, dinner was ready. Xian caught the fragrant aroma, a happy smile spreading across her face. Dinner is fish. That's wonderful. Fish really is the best. Xia Meng inquired about their upcoming plans, learning they were heading back to the kingdom of Halaya. This time, they needed to be fully prepared before heading north again, as their destination was a dungeon located in the Highlander territories. That was the oldest inhabited area in the northern part of the Dylan continent. The Dylan continent was geographically divided into two regions, the southern non-Highland area with distinct seasons, and the northern Highland area perpetually covered in snow. Seeing Xia Meng's ignorance of this common knowledge, Xian couldn't help but look at him, finding it rather strange. How could he not know even these basic things? Xia Meng broke into a cold sweat, unsure how to explain. These were facts even a 3-year-old would understand, yet he was clueless. Where exactly was his homeland? He hastily explained that he had suffered a severe head injury previously, making some things unclear. He glanced at Xian, inwardly frantic. Damn it, his excuse didn't seem very convincing. Just then, inspiration struck. He pointed towards Nan. You can ask Nan. He was the one who saved me back then. Nan, fearing Xia Meng might mention the previous explosion injury, quickly jumped in to help explain. Faced with Xian's persistent questions, the two began to purposefully deflect. One feared being captured for research, while the other was concealing the fact that he had once injured Xia Meng in an explosion. Xian watched their back and forth, picking her nose slightly. Was there something seriously wrong with these two? After a long 2-month journey, they finally returned to the kingdom of Halaya. By now, snowflakes had begun to drift down upon the land. Xia Meng spent most of his time holed up in the kitchen, creating various delicacies, while Ling Yu and Chris went to the military headquarters to handle some matters. Nan and Xian were also busy, leaving early and returning late. Swamped with work, Xia Meng prepared some thin crepes. He placed them in a cold spot to freeze solid. Once frozen, he retrieved the crepes, used molds to cut out shapes, and then baked them in the oven until golden brown. Different ingredients yielded different magical effects. Xia Meng crafted the cookies into the likeness of each person. Imagining their reactions upon seeing them, he couldn't help but chuckle foolishly. He glanced at the cookies with less potent magical effects, deciding to set them aside for now to be enjoyed as regular cookies. Checking the time, Xia Meng knew it was time to head out. He had plans to go shopping with Yu today. In a fitting room in the aristocratic district street, Xia Meng was trying on clothes. Since Yu couldn't get away due to an urgent meeting at military headquarters, she had asked Nan, who happened to be heading back anyway, to take her place. It felt almost like they were on a date, making Xia Meng slightly nervous. But then he reconsidered. They were just out shopping. What was he thinking? After trying on several outfits, Xia Meng emerged to ask for Nan's opinion. He genuinely didn't know which one to choose. Nan thought this particular set suited him very well. Xia Meng was also quite pleased with it, but the price gave him pause. The entire outfit cost over 200 gold coins. He couldn't help feeling frustrated. When he shopped with Yu before, he'd never seen clothes this expensive. 3 months savings, his little piggy bank wasn't full enough. Although he really liked both outfits, Xia Meng decided to buy only the one with the hat. He would consider the one he was wearing next time. He didn't know yet that the outfit he desired had already been quietly packaged up by Nan. As he prepared to return to the fitting room to change, Nan called out to him. They could leave now. Xia Meng asked him to wait a moment, saying he would quickly change back into his old clothes. However, Nan told him to just leave wearing the new clothes, revealing he had already purchased the entire set. Xia Meng was stunned. He hastily tried to refuse, protesting, "These are too expensive. Let's return them. I could just buy my own." Nan sighed, saying there wasn't enough time. The restaurant reservation is soon, he explained. Besides, I have something important to tell you. Xiaoming looked at him curiously. What important matter could it be? The two entered the restaurant, and a waiter led them to a private room. Once inside, Nan instructed the waiter to serve the dishes immediately. Xiaoming sat obediently to the side, feeling the atmosphere was somewhat formal. He gazed at the delicacies on the table, thinking that in such a high-class establishment, the food must surely be exceptional. After taking a bite, he found the meat very tender, just slightly lacking in seasoning, somewhat wasting such fine-quality meat. He looked towards Nan, asking him what important matter he needed to discuss, then took a deep breath and began slowly. Next, we are heading into hostile Highlander territory. According to frontline reports, signs of demonic activity have been detected there. Therefore, you don't have to accompany us this time. Xiaoming put down his fork in disbelief, urgently asking for the reason. Nan remained silent for a moment before explaining. The situation now is different from before. The level of danger has significantly increased. This time, we're not just facing demonic beasts and Highlanders. We might also encounter the demon clan itself. He didn't tell Xiaoming about the ominous premonition he harbored regarding this journey, nor about the nightmare that left him deeply unsettled, leaving Xiaoming alone at home. It seemed the protective magic arrays around the house needed further reinforcement. Meanwhile, Xiaoming was also pondering. He only knew hand-to-hand combat. Staying behind would indeed be safer. He asked again, seeking confirmation, "Is this trip really that dangerous?" And didn't hide anything. He frankly admitted, "It is indeed extremely dangerous this time," and told Xiaoming to make his own decision. He wouldn't force him. Xiaoming's hands clenched tightly under the table. Although Nan phrased it gently, Xiaoming clearly sensed that Nan didn't intend for him to come along. Suddenly, it was as if he remembered something. Not having to go on the trip, shouldn't that be what he secretly desired most? Easy work every day, far from danger. During the last battle, his strength had inexplicably surged, but he had also become impulsive and irritable, unable to heed others' advice. Though powerful, this could also be a detrimental factor. Perhaps his staying behind was truly for the best. Yet what was this heavy feeling in his chest, this sense of unwillingness and intense frustration? Why was he experiencing such emotional turmoil? He didn't want this. He didn't want to be left behind. He wanted to go with them. He desperately wanted to say it. But then again, to Nan, wasn't he just a servant? He didn't want to leave. He wanted to always be by his side, wanted to understand him more. Why did he have such thoughts? This feeling of reluctance, this attachment, it wasn't something he felt for everyone. Only towards Nan. Every action Nan took sometimes agitated him, sometimes filled him with joy. He realized he seemed to have already fallen for Nan. He looked at Nan, finally making up his mind. He would go with them. As support personnel, he would strive to provide them with buff magic. Besides, life itself is an adventure. In the bathroom, water droplets slid down Nan's body, hitting the floor. Time was growing increasingly tight. He had to speed up his preparations.